guys, and welcome to another video. This is a video I've been requested to make for quite a while, and it is for the people that have completed the story and you get to monster level, let's say 140, 135, somewhere in there, and you start to really struggle. And a lot of people need a step-by-step guide on exactly what you can do as a basic player with the least amount of resources to get you gear that will get you functional. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. I'm going to talk about the bare minimums that you need to be able to do to get good gear that can get you into the farther stuff. Now, obviously, if you're playing on season or if you have access to a unique piece, just skip over that piece. There's some really good gear that you can get, especially starting in seasonal, that you won't need to craft that particular piece. Everything is going to be timestamped so you can jump between the pieces, and I'm going to keep everything at the basic level. I'm not going to be showing any super complex builds in this. This is all just get you off the ground gear for the least amount of resources. Okay, cool? Everybody understand? Let's get into it. So I'm not sure where I'm going to put this, but I forgot to talk about this, and it's really important, so I am going to talk about it. The basic gear we are going to be making here, I'm going to show different versions, but if you are someone who is playing sentries, traps, or minions, these are probably not going to be particularly helpful other than maybe one or two. Those three things have very different requirements on gear than what a standard basic attack strike user would use. Even some of the dot-based ones will be not as well set up with this sort of base gear. Now, some of it, like the helmet, is going to be pretty universal across everybody, but some of these are not going to be good at all if you are playing those other sort of non-standard builds. And with channeling being changed up next season, that might potentially change how you would start with basic gear. But hopefully these will help everybody at least understand how to get what you want. Okay, moving on. So before I get into any of the actual crafting, I'm going to talk about the absolute basics you need to get some basic gear. Now, there's a couple of thresholds in this game we're going to talk about, but for what it is worth, there's really only two thresholds you need to worry about for this basic level gear. At monster level 121 and 141, you will get access to new tiers of mods. If you don't know what that means, don't worry, I will explain it as we go through. So if you are someone that is struggling to get to the higher tiers, basically there's going to be a threshold in terms of difficulty at monster level 144 to 145. And that has to do with curse monsters and some other modifiers that you start to gain access to in mapping when you get there. So being able to get to 141 to get that minimum level for tier 13 mods is sort of the goal. If you can't get there, you can do fine with 121s. Now, when it comes to the tiers of the gear that you're picking up as opposed to the level, it doesn't matter nearly as much. In a lot of cases, the differences between tier 33 gear and tier 34 gear is very minor. There are some times where the implicit value is going to be good, but understand that unless you're talking about a weapon specifically, the differences between a tier 34 and a tier 33 are very minor. So if you can't get a 141 tier 34, take a 33. It's fine. We're going to talk about the different modifiers and the different essences that we're going to need. And I'm going to be keeping this as low cost as possible. This is going to be very basic in every respect because I want this video to be for the people that are struggling. There's tons of videos out there that I make, other people make, showing you how to make ultimate endgame super best mega gear. That's not what this is for, because those require lots of resources, lots of farming, lots of stuff. This is for the people that are like, I just want to get into the deeper game. I want to get to, oh, I'm sorry, Stifler poked him right in the ear. I want to get to Abyssgate level 1, and you don't really know where to go. A lot of people that finish the story that have not really had a lot of experience in these kind of games end up finishing the game with nothing but unique gear on because they're like, unique must be the best stuff. And a lot of the low level uniques are really crappy. And you can make significantly better gear once you finish the story, obviously, and gain access to enchanting and crafting for then any of the basic uniques. Now, there's obviously going to be some uniques that you will get through, again, potentially through selection boxes or through events that'll be drastically stronger than what you can make. And in those cases, just, again, skip those parts. So we're going to start here, and I'm going to talk about the basic materials that we're going to be using, because people will talk about the very hard to get stuff, the things you're going to need a ton of, thousands of prefix removals or whatever in endgame. And that's not what we're talking about here. I am going to go through very quickly just the stuff that we need to make us basic gear for the least amount of effort, and where to gain access to those things so that you can get them and get going. So let's talk about gear bases. Now, when we're talking about gear bases later, not in this section, you're going to be worrying about getting perfect gem slots and different things. All we're looking for when it comes to the base level stuff is, again, item level 121 for tier 12s, item level 141 for tier 13s. The difference between 12 and 13 is not massive. It's, you want the 13, but if you are someone that is really struggling and can't get item bases at 141, 121 is fine. It's not going to make a difference. Now, what's the difference between a 121 and a 140? Nothing, basically. Virtually nothing. The only thing it is going to affect is the amount of resources it takes to do crafting. Not enchanting. Crafting is a separate thing we're going to talk about. And there's no difference. So, if you're going to start with 121 gear, just do 121 even. Don't do 122 or 123. It makes no difference to the piece of gear. Only the amount of resources that you have to spend on it to make it okay. Ideally, in a perfect world, you want to start at least 141. Every season, I don't bother making any kind of base gear until 141. Now, if you are someone who is going to use the auction house and just buy 170 level gear, this video will still apply, but you could make significantly better stuff if you have access to the 170s and the higher tier gear. But that's not what this video is for. This is for the people that are just trying to have fun and not min-max ultra everything. So bases in a lot of cases, don't really matter. Whether it's a tier 34, tier 33, the stuff on them doesn't matter in a lot of cases. On weapon, it absolutely matters. The difference between a 33 and a 34 is a significant difference in the amount of damage output you're going to get out of a weapon. In a lot of the other cases, it really doesn't matter, and all you're going to be looking for is a decent implicit value that you can make use of. In some cases, I'm going to be very specific about the piece of gear I use, like boots, because every different base type, so this is an armor dodge helmet, and if we go over to this one, it is an armor barrier helmet. Those bases affect the base mods that you have access to. In cases like boots, there are very specific modifiers we are going to want to get the most out of them, even though you might not be a build that necessarily uses that. So when it comes to boots, generally you're going to want an armor barrier, and in certain cases, boots, gloves, whatever, the base amount of stuff you're going to get from it from the base part, not the modifiers we're going to add, but the base part makes virtually no difference. A tier 35 boot has basically the exact same value of armor and barrier that you would get from a tier 31. It's virtually not a difference at all. So certain bases are going to matter, certain bases aren't. Weapons is definitely the one that if you are going to be crafting your own base weapon, which I don't necessarily recommend you do, but we'll talk about that when we get there. It's the one where you want a tier 34 as over a tier 33. The bases of a lot of these aren't going to matter, and in certain cases, depending on what type of build you are using, the base will make a big difference. So if you're going to be doing a barrier build, and we'll talk about that, the barrier chest piece is absolutely got to be a specific base type. But we'll talk about that when we get to them. Overall, bases are really not the biggest difference when we're talking about this very small base level, get us off the ground gear. Okay, let's go. I've already filmed 2 other sections, so they're going to be after this, and then I'll see you when we're doing the actual work. Okay, so you've got your base, and again, I'm not sure, I'm probably filming this out of order, so wherever it is, you've got your base that you're going to be using for whatever thing. Let's talk about the materials that we use in crafting that you need to have access to, and the quantities of these things that you will need to make a, again, very intro level enchanted piece of gear that will be better than most of the uniques that you'll probably have access to. So first thing, you're going to need rare birth essence. These are super common. You can get them everywhere. You're not going to need many of these things. You will have tons of them. As you can see, I have 16,000 of these right now, and that's fine. You can use them to make a thing that we're going to use later called an Alyssa essence. The blue, the magic birth essence, are completely worthless, and at the alchemy table you can make the blue ones into the yellow ones, and I recommend you do that always. You will virtually never use the magic birth essence. It is there pretty much exclusively to make the other one. It had purposes back farther, but currently there's absolutely no use. This is going to let us roll the mods for certain things and make our lives a little easier. But anyways, you're not going to need a lot of these things. If you get a lot of them, again, like 16,000 of them, you can use the alchemy table yet again to turn them into Alyssa essence. That's crafting. That's not the right thing. Alchemy table. So alchemy table, you can go to essence, and right here, you can take your things and turn them into Alyssas. Early on, Alyssas are incredibly effective. Now, later on, you can use them to great help in gear, but early on you will only need maybe 1 when you're making any piece of basic level gear, and that will let you get the best modifier that you're looking for. Again, it'll make sense when we talk about it. You won't need a lot of these. You will need a lot of them much later in the game, so don't go nuts using them early on, but again, having a couple of those is really helpful as well. The next thing we are definitely going to be using early on is the disintegration essence. This is something that at a low level you will use lots of, because you can save yourself a ton of resources by using these that you will need later. Now, all they do is remove a mod at random from your gear. There are more focused versions of these that are prefix option removal essence and suffix option removal essence. These are for specifically picking 1 random prefix and 1 random suffix and removing it. Early on, disintegration essence save you using those materials that you will need lots of later. So using these early on is a much better choice. You will get these completely at random. You will get tons and tons of them. You will never run out of these things unless you're doing some absolute lunatic level stuff. So those are the 2 basic things we're going to need. The other thing we're going to need is rare imbue essence, the yellow coins. You're going to need a decent amount of these because you are going to be coining quite a bit. If you have a couple hundred, you're in good shape. You don't need thousands of these things to do what we're going to be doing. Again, the blue ones that you get, immediately use the alchemy table to turn them into the yellow ones. You will never use the blue ones virtually ever. The other stuff we will need for sure is eventually a Vesper essence. These are the hardest of them to get, and they are the thing that you will use a lot of at high end. So you're going to try to use the least amount of these you can when we are doing the gear. Okay. The next thing, probably the most important thing that is early on a pain to get a couple of, but once you get them, you'll get thousands and they won't matter, is the authority essence. Without knowing anything about the process, these let you get specific modifiers that you can't normally get on gear, and we will use a few of these as we go through. A lot of the time you will only end up using 1 of these on a piece of gear for basic starter stuff. They are sometimes a bit hard to get. Now, normally, I would say go to the Constellation of Time and run 1. That's not going to exist next season in its current form, so they're a little harder to get. Typically, they drop from the tier 11 bosses. They also drop as you are moving through the statue levels. The challenges that you do are against authority bosses, and you can get them from there. And I am going to talk about other ways to get all of these things when I'm done explaining what they do. So you're going to need, again, one of these, possibly two, through all this process per piece that you're going to do. A lot of the time early on, you're only going to end up using one. Outside of that, there's a few less important things we are going to use, like the pineapple. All this is going to do is roll the values to their maximums once you get all the modifiers you want. You'll need a couple of these, not many. You will also need the quality birth essence and the quality modification essence. Quality birth essence, you will get a crazy amount of these things, and really, you're never going to need more than maybe 200 of these things at any given time. And once you get a lot of them, you can use them to turn into the quality modification essence at the alchemy table. Same reasoning. You only need so many of these, and these are going to be more important and harder to get. So you can turn those. Outside of that, the only other thing we are going to be using is a legendary upgrade essence and a legendary removal essence. Now, or reversion, sorry, not removal. The early stages of the game, getting reversions is hard. And that's why I'm going to use parts of things in a very specific way so that we can get the most without using a lot of these. The legendary is going to make the item legendary. It's going to add extra modifiers. That's great. It's also going to lock a bunch of things so we can do stuff to the gear to get what we want. The reversion essence is going to take it from legendary back to rare. And there's some very specific reasons we do this. And later on, you're going to be doing it so that you can try to get the optimal legendary modifiers. You're going to legendary and reversion back and forth until you get it. But we're not using it for that. We're going to use them to let us force other modifiers onto gear that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get. Now, in an extreme case, the other thing we are going to use is Serpent's Essence. If you are playing on standard, they are virtually impossible to get, other than through the auction house or through the black market. And again, I'm going to talk more about some of this stuff. So the second page here will potentially have some serpents. We will use lots of these at the high end. At the low end, trying to use them is generally going to be a bad idea. There are some very, very specific purposes we will try to use them in very low quantities. But again, if you are someone starting out, you can't farm these. Even on seasonal, you won't have access to them. And we don't gain any of them through any source other than the black market. If we have the ability to do it and get them, I'm going to show two different versions of the gear, where one you can use a serpens, a single one or maybe two, to get some stuff. But I'm going to do a lot of this without using those at all, because obvious reason, they're hard to get. There's all of the resources that we're going to be using. So again, let's go through them quick. You're going to need some rare birth essence, some rare change essence, some disintegration essence, some rare imbue essence, legendaries, legendary reversions. And I'm going to talk again about specifically how to get those in an easier way. Alyssa's, Vespers, and authority essence, and potentially some serpents. Outside of that, you don't need anything fancy, and you don't need tens of millions of gold to do what we are going to do. You can do this for very low. Now that we've talked about this, let's talk about the places you can gain some of these materials that are harder to get, because people are going to ask, and I'm just going to put it here so that you can find all the places that you can access these harder to get things at a low level so that you can get yourself moving and then actually get to a point where you can farm these things. Okay, now that we've got the stuff that we need, where do we get it? Again, a lot of the stuff is very easily accessible. The snakes, as I call them, the rare birth essence, you're going to get tons of them all the time. The blue ones convert, okay? Same with the coins. You're going to get lots of these coins, use the blue ones to convert. Disintegration essence are going to drop everywhere. Pineapples are going to drop everywhere. The Alyssas you can make from the snakes. We already talked about that at the alchemy table. And authority essences drop typically from the tier 11 bosses. If you can't get to tier 11 bosses, these can be a bit of a hassle to get, but eventually you're going to get some of them through rewards and stuff. Vespers are something, again, that are going to be very hard to farm. Anything you can do to get essence drop rarity and stuff, I have separate videos on these topics, but anything you can do to get essence drop rarity or essence drop chance, item drop rarity, those kinds of things will help you get these, but you're not going to need a lot of these for what we're doing. You will be given some of these as a reward for doing certain quests. Legendary upgrade essence is something that very early on you're going to have trouble getting, but there is a great way to get lots of these by running mines. Now, mines are their own problem on their own. If you watch my mines video, that'll help get some of these. The reversions are one of the first things that we would like a few of that are very hard to get. If you have finished the story and you've run the Custodia and Giva, you will be given 2 of these as rewards for completing that. If you haven't done that, go do those so that you can get access to them. Otherwise, the other good places to gain the things we're looking for are the main one, the disassemble shop. If you haven't seen in the shop, so disassemble up in the corner here, we've got a menu. We can buy things for shoddy fragments. Shoddy fragments get from everything you dismantle. Basically everything you dismantle will give you these. Some will give you other stuff, but most gear and pretty much everything you're going to get is going to get these. This is a great way to gain access to the beginner stuff we need. Now, you can convert your shoddies into precious fragments. Don't do that if you're starting out. Keep them as shoddy fragments, use them as necessary, and then later, once you have got to a point where you have an established piece of gear and you're planning on making a bigger move up to the item level 161 or 165 stuff, which we're not going to talk about in this video, is you can make the precious fragments. For starting out, though, keep them as shoddy fragments because you probably use them to better effect early on. So, first page has some stuff that we would want. You can get authority essences in here, legendaries in here, and most importantly, legendary reversion essences in here. Starting out, this is a great way to get these things if you can't farm them on your own. You can also get Alyssas in here. I don't recommend getting them in here because you can just make Alyssas from snakes. The other stuff you are going to want, once we get to a point where we're going to use them, are the prefix option and suffix option essences. You can get them in here for fairly cheap, and since you will use a lot of these at the high end, this is a great place to get them. The other place you can get some of the stuff we are looking for is the 2 ore shops. First ore shop you get with Gemstones of Courage, which you gain as you clear areas through the story, and you also get them from a bunch of other resources. In here, we can get a lot of the stuff we want. Again, Vespers, Alyssas, and in the second page, we can get a couple of the other stuff we want, the prefix and suffix stuff, and Alyssas and Vespers. So, there's those. There are other ways to gain these things through different challenges and stuff, but that's where we gain all the stuff. That's the best ways, is those 2 shops. Okay, we've got all of our resources ready. Let's talk directly about actually making some gear. We're going to start with the piece of gear that I always start every season with. Every piece of gear is going to have sort of certain modifiers that you can get at low level that are going to be better than most of the uniques that you have access to at that point. Helmet is what I always start with, because helmet will give us sort of the most bang for our buck for a very small amount of resources. So helmet bases, when it comes to it, there's really only 2 that you're going to be thinking about early on. You're either going to be getting one with element penetration, or you're going to be getting one with physical penetration. Didn't I already have one? I thought I did. There it is. So armor penetration. So these are the 2. That's basically it. The implicit values don't really matter. So whether it's armor dodge, or armor barrier or dodge barrier or whatever. If you are specifically going to be doing a barrier build, you are going to need pieces that have armor so that you can get your armor up, and you're going to need pieces with dodge so you can get your dodge up, or at least to start out. But really, these are the two best bases when it comes to helmets early on, because they're going to give you a decent amount of penetration, and penetration leads to damage. And this is a great way to get a decent chunk of penetration early on. So, doesn't matter which one. In this case, we're just going to use the physical one, because a lot of builds, currently at least, are physical. Not that's going to make a difference to what we put on this, but this is what we're going to do. So, the reason I start with helmet is helmet gives us a lot of enhanced skill buff for very little resource. If you're new to the game, enhanced skill is your big, I want to kill everything right now, but it's got a big long cooldown, and in a perfect world, you want to get that cooldown, you want to get the duration up, and you want to get as much effect on it as you can. And this helmet will do all of that all at once. It's also going to give us access to some damage amplification and some defenses early on for basically no cost. The way we're going to go about this is, first we are going to put an authority on this thing so that we can gain access to a modifier. The first one we want is this Akuben authority. If you scroll down on the list, you can see that we get enhanced skill rune cooldown recovery speed, and we get a big chunk of it, so like 50%. It's a lot of cooldown. That's going to take our 30-second effect and bring it down to 15 seconds or something like that. It's a big difference, okay? It's all you need to really know. This is the most important modifier for prefixes. When it comes to the rest of the prefix options, it really comes down to whatever you need at the time. Typically, what I do is I get gear, dodge, the first two modifiers, okay? It's whatever the base value is. So if it's armor or dodge or barrier, it's going to have a percent version of it, and it's going to have a flat version of it. And that's typically what I go for my starter helmet, because we can get a decent chunk of dodge, dodge, armor, or barrier, okay? Or some combination of them. And then our third modifier will be the prefix we just talked about. So that's where we're going to start, okay? We're going to put an authority on Akuben, and you just hit bam. Now, this does two things. It gives us access to a modifier, which is the cooldown that we want, and it puts an authority mod on here that is chosen from the top 5 here. Now, there's a bunch of different ones, and in a perfect world, generally, you just want either the stat, okay? So either dexterity, strength, or int, or in a better world, stat. It's not going to make much of a difference. Now, we got gear drop chance, which is not very good. But we are going to be changing this authority later, so this mod doesn't matter right now. That mod's going to get changed no matter what we do. So once we've got that on, we have two different ways we can go about getting the mods that we want. And I'm going to show both of them because, again, I'm trying to keep this as resource light as possible. If you have basically nothing and you've just started, you're going to be using a rare birth essence. Go into repeat settings here. We're going to take the 3 mods that we want. So our gear, dodge, barrier. Now, if you don't want to go with the dodge barriers, you can go with hit points as well. You could take both of those out. You could go hit point, percent, hit point. That's also a really great way to get starter stuff. Okay. In this case, you know what? We'll do it this way. We'll go hit point and hit point, because it's not going to make much of a difference to how difficult it is to get the things, because it's going to be very easy. And then we take our third modifier. So there's the 3 prefixes that we want. You always work on a prefix or a suffix set, so all 3 of them first, and then you're going to do the other one. So in this case, we've got these. And what I typically do, if I have very few resources, is all 3 of these have the same chance to hit. So we're going to change the options fulfilled to 2, and we're just going to let it roll. Okay? And eventually it will hit 2 of those mods together as a prefix. This is the easier way to do it, but it's going to cost you more time. Okay? Now, there's a faster way. It's more expensive, but we'll do this. So we got our 2. We have an open prefix. I know it's hard to tell the difference between prefix and suffix, but prefix have this little hood with a dot on the top, and suffix have a little bottom with a dot. Okay, so we have an open prefix. Okay, we've got our hit point, our cooldown, and now we're going to use a coin to hopefully hit our other hit point. Now, depending on how few resources you have, you could be happy taking just the 2. Or maybe you hit hit point, but your third one is the barrier or whatever. Okay, there's a lot of good options, and especially starting out, there's no reason to worry about optimizing this piece of gear. This is a piece of gear you're going to hold on to for a week or 2 before you make yourself a better one. So that's the first way. Okay, going in, putting the 3 mods that you want, rolling till 2, and then if there's an open one, coining, or getting really lucky and hitting what you want. Okay, let this go for a second here. Generally, this is the cheapest way to go about doing it. So there we go. We got hit, our cooldown, our hit point. We can take. The other way is to use an Alyssa. Alyssa will guarantee the mod that you pick from the list, and then will give you higher value rolls for all of the other things, but they're going to be random. So let's use one of those. Now, it doesn't really matter in this case which one of the ones we pick. We want all 3, but typically you use an Alyssa to guarantee the one that is harder to get. We're going to talk about that more when we get to other gear. So we're going to use our enhanced skill, cooldown, recovery speed, and use one. And now we're guaranteed to get an enhanced skill, cooldown, recovery speed, but the other modifiers are not what we want. Now, this is where disintegration essences come in. Now, we don't need to do this on this piece of gear, but I'm going to show this process now, and then I'm going to talk about it again when we get to other pieces of gear. Disintegration essence will pick one random mod on here and get rid of it. So if I use it, it got rid of a prefix. We can now use a coin to try and get one of the prefixes we want. Okay, we didn't get it. Now, this is really good for getting 2 hard to get modifiers together in the cheapest way. In this case, you would not do this process. You wouldn't use the Alyssas on something where all the values are easy to get. So we'll go back to doing it this way. We got our 2 hit point things, and we'll let it go. Now, I'm not actually going to roll to try and get all 3 because this piece of gear is just for demonstration purposes, and I don't want to sit here and take forever going through every single modifier trying to get them perfect. But most of the time, you can get this fairly quickly for not a lot of gold and not a lot of resources. So we got our 2. Unfortunately, this is definitely not one we would want. So you could, at this point, use a disintegration essence to try and remove the 3rd prefix that we don't want. It got rid of one we do want. If it hit the other one, you could coin and try to get the 3rd. It's a great way to get modifiers early on for low resource cost and low essence cost and gold and stuff. Of course, this is taking much longer than it normally does. So we got our 2. Let's see if we get a 3rd good one. Reflect damage. Let's assume, though, for the sake of the video, that this is our hit. You're done step 1. Congratulations. Now, because this is the most important modifier on here, there are a couple of ways we can go about doing the next step. And depending on how many resources you have, you will never want to use a Vesper on a 6 modded item. Vespers reroll the values of the tiers. So this, we have a tier 6, we want a 13. That's our most important modifier. So we would use a Vesper now that we have all 3 of these to try and get them. Now, what you can do is get all 6 modifiers and roll Vespers and hope for the best. But that's not a great resource cost when you are at a low level and you have very few Vespers and you're just trying to get going. So what I recommend is using suffix option removal essence, or prefix option if you're working on suffixes, to remove the other modifiers. So in this case, we're going to remove all 3 of the suffixes. So we only have our prefixes. And we're going to use a Vesper to try and get our enhanced skill rune cooldown recovery speed to tier 13, and the other 2 to a decent value. So there's a 13, but that's a 6 and a 6, or 6 and a 5. We don't want that. There's another bad one. We're just trying to get decent. So in this case, well, even though it doesn't, we'll do till decent values here. So there we go. We got a 12, a 13 to 13. That's just about as good as you can get. So that took me, what, 7 Vespers? And if we were trying to do it with 6 mods, it would likely take a lot more to hit the values on the things we want. Depending on the piece of gear, sometimes it's worth Vespering everything. In this case, because we're showing the basics, I would do this. On a helmet, I would actually do all 6 early on, depending on what your values hit. So if you are making your prefixes and you end up with decent values, so let's say you got like all 10s and you were just at this step before you Vespered and you got all 10s, say, you know what, let's hold on to that. But since we had a 6, it was worth at least attempting to Vesper. Once we're at this point, we have to do the suffixes. And there's a lot of ways we can go about this, but we actually want different modifiers for our suffixes. And the way you do that is using an authority essence to change the authority. But if you do that, as you see here, it's going to completely re-imbue the whole thing, which means we need to find a way to lock these down. And the way to do that is to use a legendary upgrade essence. So we're going to use one, and you can see little lock icons. So now anything we do to this piece of gear won't change those pieces. Great, that's the values we want. So now we can use an authority essence, and in this case, we're going to use Capri authority. Now you can't see the mods here because I've already got it legendary, but I'll show the ones we're looking for after. So when we use that, now the authority changes to fire. Doesn't matter that it's fire, but it now changed the authority, which changes the mods that are available for our prefix or suffixes. The other thing it changes is this modifier here, the authority modifier, as I call it. I don't know what its actual name is, but we would at this point want to make sure that it is one of the ones we want. Now we got stats, which is exactly what we want. You can see the other options that were available. We had strength, gear drop chance, stat, gear item quality, and mana. The only 2 we really care about is strength and stat. So we got stat and we got it at a perfect roll. Awesome. That's what we're hoping for. At this point, make sure you use a couple of these to get one that's at least okay, because you're not going to have a way to change this again, potentially at all, or until we get to a legendary. I generally just try to get it at this point so I don't have to worry about it. After that, we have to use a legendary reversion essence. Most of these pieces of gear, we're not going to have to do this process, but using this in this case is going to give us a lot. So since you get 2 of them as a reward from the missions, this is a great place to make use of them. Save your other one for a later version, a better version of the helmet. But for now, there we go. I'm choking on spit here. I'm talking too much. So now that we've got our Capri authority, we can reversion, and it will take it back to rare, unlock these, and now we can work on our suffixes. Since we changed the authority, we can go look and now see that there are new modifiers. I didn't show you, but there's new modifiers in here that are authority modifiers. In this case, there are 2 that we would really like to get: the enhanced skill rune effect and the critical damage. Now, even if you are not a critical build, this critical damage is going to be important, and I will explain when we get there. The third modifier you're going to want is totally up to you. There are a bunch of things you can take, but again, we're talking about base level stuff here. And typically, base level, we're going to take a resist or chaos, or so any of the element resist, fire, cold, lightning, poison, or chaos. If you got hit rate, that's totally okay. And element resist plus is also a great one. It's just solid element resist to everything. The one in a perfect world that you would want would be totem hit point. Now, if you are starting out, you do not want totem hit point. And the reason I will explain when we get to the crafting process of this helmet. So that would be a perfect world, but we don't want that. Okay, we don't want perfect world. I know that sounds nuts, but we don't want that. So you want the enhanced skill rune effect and the critical damage, and hopefully a resist. So first step to this is you can use coins to coin in and hopefully get stuff you want. So we got our critical damage. That's great. The values of the stuff we're getting are all fairly close. They're all very high. Okay? Enhanced skill rune effect, 6.7%. Critical damage, 6.7%. All the resists are 8%. So we got one of the ones we want. This is the part where things could potentially get a little bit expensive. in terms of resources. So you're going to be using things called suffix option removal essence and suffix option birth essence. We're going to try to use as few as possible because this is a starter helmet. Suffix option birth or removal essence is going to remove a random suffix only. So it'll either remove the hit rate, the critical damage, or the sentry hit point. In a perfect world, we would have it hit sentry hit point. Of course, hit it critical, and we're going to coin. So now we have none of the 2 authority modifiers. At that point, use a birth essence and start back to step 1. Now we got our critical. So now we have critical, and we're going to try to use a removal, and it's going to hit the critical again, obviously, because this game hates me when I do videos. Anytime you have 3 modifiers that are not at least one of the modifiers we are looking for, the 2 important ones, the authority modifiers, use a birth. If there's a space, use a coin. If there's one of the ones you want, use a removal. Okay, so here, and then bam. There, we got our critical, use a removal, and try to coin. There we go. Okay, now this won't take long. You might, if you're really unlucky, this might take you a bunch of rolls. But generally, you're going to get it fairly quickly. Now, the things that matter when it comes to what you're getting here. Ideally, you want both of these values to be fairly high. The critical damage must be at least tier 8. Okay, so in this case, it's tier 6. You can either continue to roll these again because it's easier to get these back at a higher rate than it is to use the other option, which is use Vespers. So ideally, the 2 most important modifiers on here are the enhanced skill rune cooldown recovery speed and the enhanced skill rune effect. We want these to be tier 12 or 13 on this piece of gear, and or 11 or 12 if you're on a tier 1 or a item level 121. So there's the 2 most important ones. So we got a 10. Now, I can show you the difference because some people want to know why. So enhanced skill rune effect, if you click on the thing. So here's our 10, maxes out at 20, and 13 goes up to 28. It's 8% difference. You have to decide for yourself if you want to spend resources to get that extra little bit. Again, early on, probably not worth Vespering just to get this to a higher value because you're going to lose this one. And if this was an 8, I would take this. But this critical damage needs to be an 8 or higher. And again, when we get to the next step, I will talk about why. So in this case, we are going to Vesper, which typically, and as I showed earlier, we don't want to do on 6 mods because this and this are very important, and hitting them both at a higher value could cost a lot of resources. So used 1, both of the things we want drop to a 6. There's a 13 and a 6. Oh, that's double 13 and a 6, of course. And again, if that had hit 8 and this was higher, we would take it. So again, this is where saving Vespers and doing it with just 3 is going to be the best way to go, because if you get to this point, it's better to just re-roll the suffixes and try to get what you want than it is to use Vespers. So I'm going to use just a couple more here, and then I'm going to just assume that we got what we wanted. So there's good enough. Let's assume that this is actually a 13 or a 12 or whatever. We got a good enough value that we'll take it. Because again, I'm going to throw this out when I'm done. This is a beginner helmet. We've got our 13 or 12 or 11 even on our 2 mods that we want. So our enhanced skill rune cooldown and our enhanced skill rune effect. And our critical damage is 8 or higher. Okay? It doesn't matter if it's really high, as long as it's 8 or higher. The other mods, obviously, if you can get decent values for those things, great. That's what you want. The next step in the process is to re-roll using the Rare Change Essence. Rare Change Essence is just going to re-roll the values of the stuff you have. So everything has a range. Okay, this goes from the enhanced skill rune cooldown recovery speed goes from 24 to 32 in increments of 0.1. So we want to make sure that's as close to 32 as possible. And also our enhanced skill rune effect is close to its max. The critical damage modifier, damage, the value of it doesn't matter at all. We are not keeping it. We are going to get rid of it. Obviously, the other things, if they have a high range, you can get the ones you want. So we're going to re-roll this until this gets close to 32. So there we got a 32. And then if this was good, we would move to the next step. So we got that. Now there's a bunch of other things we can do here that are all, the order of them is not important. Quality is something that we would consider. And all quality will do on armor is re-roll the percent of the dodge rate, barrier, armor. Okay, so if I use this and I get some quality on here, these values go up. Depending on the piece of gear, sometimes quality matters, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, maxing out the quality on this isn't going to do much. If we had used the percent dodge or the flat dodge barrier, this value would be higher and these would matter more. In this case, it doesn't really matter. On weapon, it really matters. On things like shoulder and chest piece, it really matters. And again, helmet, if you are doing specifically percentage instead of health, if you had gone with the percentage dodge, armor, barrier, whatever, those values are going to be important. So you get quality. Quality birth essence go up to 10. So you re-roll at random between 1 and 10. If you get 8 or higher, take it. The other one rolls between -10 and +20. So if you don't have a lot of these, roll it and see what the value is. So that's a 13. That's pretty good. We would take that. We would just, that's fine. Next step we have is legendary. Starting out, you were just going to legendary and hope for the best. You don't have a lot of resources to re-roll these things, and in a piece of gear that you're not going to be keeping for very long, you're just going to be happy with whatever you get. Legendary is going to add 1 or potentially 2 modifiers that are not connected to these ones. If you hover over, or not hover, if you click on the legendary and then click the thing, you can see the options. In this case, hit points, element resist, dodge rate, barrier, and then suffixes. You would want hit rate, stats, resource cost dampen, or damage. Obviously, if you're a minion build or whatever, I didn't talk about that earlier. I'm going to go back and go way back, and we'll do that. But there we go. So we're going to legendary. We got damage. Great. That's a good one to have. Everything else we are going to do on here falls into 2 categories: jewels and crafting. And we're going to go do that right now. Okay, we've got our helmet and the base of it's done. We got our prefixes, our suffixes, our legendary, all that. Next 2 things we can do are jewels. Starting out, it is very difficult to get black jewels. So what you're typically going to do is go white jewels on everything. There are reasons to do red jewels. There are reasons to do green. There are reasons to do blue. But most of the time, you're just going to be wanting white jewels on every one of your gear slots for armor on your character. Jewelry, so rings, amulet, and belt, are separate. We're going to talk about them separate. And weapons are separate as well. We're going to talk about those. So all we're going to do is find our helmet here, and we're going to re-roll it to get a white socket. So on the jewel thing, 3rd thing, and it should not take many. There we go. We got a white socket. Then we're going to go grab a white jewel. We're going to run mines or whatever and get a white jewel and use this early on to shore up defenses. Typically is what I say. So get a white jewel with element resist if your element resist is really low. Get chaos resist if your chaos resist is really low. There are some really good named modifiers on white gear or white jewels that you can put in here. But again, this is all just get you up and running stuff. So you're not trying to be really fancy here. Don't waste black jewels. Don't waste star jewels. This is just get it off the ground. White jewels have a ton of different, I don't have any on me. White jewels have a lot of good basic stuff, okay, that you can get early on. And I typically use the armor slots to just shore up, again, element resist, chaos resist, armor, dodge, that kind of thing. Next step is crafting is the most tedious part of this process. And every piece of gear that I'm going to be talking about is going to be just doing regular crafting. You're not going to be doing high crafting. You're not even going to attempt it. You're just going to do regular crafting. It is not worth even attempting to do a high craft and potentially failing and then having to reset and wasting resources that will be much, much better spent later on higher end gear. In this case, the thing we want to craft and how crafting works is you're either going to add to a modifier or change a modifier completely into a different one. In this case, our critical damage, which whether you were a critical build or not, is garbage. It is a very low percent of critical damage. Even if you were a crit build, this critical damage is not worth it. But it turns into damage amplification, which is the modifier that everybody wants as much of as they can get everywhere on their gear. If you are a physical build, you are going to roll until you get physical damage amplification. If you are an element build, you are going to roll till you get element damage amplification. It can roll up to the same tier as your modifier and no higher, and it can't go above tier 13. So we have 13 on here. We're going to roll this critical damage and hope to get physical damage amplification. We got it literally on the first try. It is not worth re-rolling it to get higher, okay? In this case, we got a 10, which is 4, and then we could re-roll a whole bunch of times and waste a ton of resources to get up to 7, which is a lot more, but early on, just take the first one you get, and that is it. Your gear is done. Don't worry about going to the next step and going into high craft, because what can happen is if I try to high craft this, actually, let's do it for the video. If I high craft this, it could potentially hit a modifier and re-roll it like this critical damage. But sometimes it'll re-roll it into something you really don't want. If you feel like doing it, in this case, I rolled and I got extra hit rate. And that's all it did. It didn't change anything. But if this had turned enhanced skill rune cooldown recovery speed into hit points, that's terrible. That we don't want that. So you don't typically high craft on this stuff. But that's it. We're done the helmet. Overall, what this thing will be getting us is a huge amount of cooldown for enhanced skill. It's going to increase the amount of amp we're getting from our enhanced skill, and we're going to be getting either element or physical damage amplification, plus hit points, dodge, barrier, whatever the other things are. It's a very solid piece. It gives us everything we want. We got some damage from it as well. And that's what I start with every season. That's the helmet that I start with. I make this exact helmet in this exact way every season at the first piece I make. The other gear is all going to come up to how many resources we got and depending on your build, but I'm going to move on to the next piece, and I don't know what that's going to be, but see you in a second. Okay, next up, we're going to do chest piece. This is typically the second piece I work on. Now, again, depending on what you get, sometimes you might get a unique piece that is better than what you're going to be able to enchant, and early on in a game, it's hard to tell what is better, but typically I go for chest piece second. Chest piece is going to give us our biggest defensive value in regards to dodge, armor, or barrier. If you're a barrier user, your chest piece is going to be full barrier, and it is non-negotiable. It is your biggest barrier source, unless you're talking about the Boreal Shield. But we're not doing barrier on this. We're going to talk about let's say, an armor piece. Now, the barrier would go exactly the same way. Same would be the dodge. Knowing which one, whether armor or dodge, you are going to do comes down to a ton of factors that I don't want to go through because it would make this already going to be very long video that much longer. But I will say it like this. If you are going to be a barrier user, your chest piece is going to be all barrier, and I'll talk about that in a second. If you are a shield user, typically you will go all dodge on your chest piece for starting out. Okay, this isn't super end game. This is just getting us off the ground. And if you're not going to be using a shield, you want all armor in your chest piece. There are different bases, obviously we've talked about already, and this is a pure armor piece, this is a pure dodge piece, and this is an armor dodge piece. Never use hybrid, okay? And there's a reason for that when it comes to chest piece. The value you will get out of a hybrid is much lower than getting all of it from one source. So if you're going to go, let's say, all armor on the chest piece, you might go all dodge on the shoulder or the glove. and you will get more out of a pure dodge and a pure armor than you would out of 2 hybrids. Okay, always when it comes to these very large values for your base defenses, go pure. Okay, now the other reason you would potentially do a hybrid is for things like this. Okay, for damage taken dampening implicit, but we're talking starter stuff. Always just go with the lowest denominator. Okay, get the biggest value. Okay, the armor in this case, the implicit doesn't matter. If you get one that has a cool implicit, whether it's a 33, or sorry, you're always going to want a 34 in this case because the value is that much higher. I don't have, or do I have a 33? I bet I do. Hold on, let's look. So here's a tier 33 pure armor piece. Its maximum armor at low value is 1655. And if we go back up to the pure armor here, this is 1705. And that 50 doesn't sound like much, but when we add it to all the other modifiers, it's going to lead up to a much, much bigger value. So that's something you want to consider. Try to get the tier 34, or not try to get a tier 34, whether you're using dodge, armor, or barrier. If it comes to barrier, there is 2 different T34s. One, I don't have one to show you, but one has an implicit value and one does not have an implicit value. If you are going with a pure barrier build, get one without an implicit value. The base amount of barrier will be way higher without that implicit value, and that implicit sucks. So don't even consider it if you're going barrier. If you're going armor dodge, having an implicit on that, I don't think there was any option of non-implicit ones, so it doesn't really matter. In this case, we're going to go with an armor piece just because, okay? The way you are going to build this piece is going to be the same which one you use. It's all going to come out to the same. It's just a matter of what piece you're going, or what base defense you're going to get for it from it. So we've got our chest piece, and what the 2 prefixes we want, no matter what, are going to be the base defense and the base defense percent. Okay, in this case, armor. So gear armor plus percent. Those are the 2 we want. Those 2 together is going to make this 1559 that we've currently got way higher. The other thing we do want to look at is look at the value of the thing. And as I picked this piece specifically because this has a current value of 1559, but its maximum is 1705. And that's crappy. If you are going to make a piece, farm one that the value is as close to max as possible. Now, there are ways to change this using these option stat change essence. They are friggin' impossible to get, okay? Don't waste them on something like this. So just farm one that has a good base armor value, because this is basically bottom of the barrel, and that 200 difference we could have would make a massive difference in the end. But in this case, since I'm doing just a demo, assume I got a good one. So the 2 modifiers we know we want on the prefix are gear armor and gear armor percent. Okay, very straightforward. Now, when it comes to the authority modifiers that we are going to want on here, we are going to want one of a handful of specific prefixes. And depending on what your build is, we are going to want different ones. So first one we are definitely going to want, if we are going to be it, is, or potentially anyway, is attack damage skill rune level. It can give you up to 3 extra levels on your main skill, and levels on your main skill make a big difference in the end game. So getting this is good. If you were a spellcaster, you would want spell damage skill rune level, or if you are worried about survival, you want dampen damage taken. Now, I'm going to assume that, like me, you don't want to die when you're playing. And instead of going for the damage, because this is a beginner piece, this is something we're just trying to make sure we can push deeper into the game to get better stuff, to get to the end game where we could make a much, much better, more powerful piece than what we are going to show here when we have the resources to do that. So we're going to take the Spica, which is the one that gives us our dampen damage taken. It's up to 15% at max, which is a lot, especially early on. This is absolutely the best place to get dampened damage early on. So we are going to take that as opposed to one of the offensive ones. The other nice thing about chess pieces, the resistance values on the suffixes are huge. If you look here at max level, we get 123 lightning resist. So we're not going to worry about trying to get anything in terms of offense from this piece right now. Later on, we can go nuts with this thing. We can get all kinds of damage out of this thing. But right now, all we want is base level stuff. So we're going to use the Spica Authority. Boop, and put that on. And we're going to do the same process as we did with the helmet because the values are all the same again. 8%, 8%, and 8%. So we're going to roll until we get 2 of them and then coin the third one. This takes a little bit. I'll speed through it, but this generally goes pretty quick. So we got 2 of our modifiers, coin to try and get the third one. We got dot skill rune level. Now, as a dot user, this is great. This is in fact actually what exactly I'm using on my dot character right now. Because you can use the dampen damage taken, and if you happen to be a dot user, you can go for this. But again, we're talking basic. We want to make sure we are nice and secure to make it deeper into the game so we can get better stuff. So instead of this, we are going to try to remove this. Again, 2 different ways to do it, the cheap way and the hard way, or the cheap way, the more expensive way. So the cheap way, use a disintegration essence to try and remove the dot skill rune level, or you could use a prefix removal. Don't use a prefix removal if you're starting out. It's much easier to try and just re-roll these. So we're going to re-roll. We will use the disintegration if we have to. Hopefully we don't. Okay, so we got same thing again. So try to remove with disintegration, and we hit it, and then we coin, and we didn't get our armor. Try disintegration again to try and remove this freeze dodge chance, and we hit it, and we coin, and we got hit points. Now, if this gear armor was percent, we might take it, but because it is flat, is only good if we hit the percent. On its own, it doesn't do much. If you had to choose between percent and flat, you would always take the percent. In this case, we want to keep going, try to remove. We hit the other, that's okay. Start back, re-roll, and I'm going to just skip to when I get it. Unless I get it in this like next attempt here. Keep getting the dot skill rune level. That's hilarious. So, disintegration, we got rid of it, coin, dot skill rune level again. This game hates me when I'm trying to do videos. Hit points again. So, you're gonna just follow this process again. Just pick options fulfilled 2, gear armor percent, dampen damage taken, roll until you get 2, coin for the third one. If you want to try and disintegration essence to remove and then continue, you can. We're just gonna take the next one we get and assume I have got the 2 armors. Actually, no, I'm gonna roll it until I get it, just so you can see the difference. So, gear armor percent. So, here's to show how much of a difference it is. If you saw a second ago, when we had the flat value, the armor was 1700. With the percent, it is 4000. It's so much more with the percent. Now, the percent will go even higher if we can get lucky and get the flat armor. And of course we didn't. So I'm going to just pop off screen for a second, re-roll this to get the actual value so you can see how much of a difference it is getting these and why they're so important to your base defenses. So base number 1500, with percent it's 4700, and you'll see in a second what it is with the flat and the percent. Okay, now we've got our prefixes. We've got our armor and our dampen damage taken. And much like with the helmet, at this point, when you are on low resources, it is best to remove the suffixes and then Vesper, which is what we're gonna do. There we go. Nearly perfect roll first try. That's what you're hoping for. So you can see that we are now at 7200 armor. It is a massive difference, and that armor is going to get modified by every other modifier you have that increases your armor percent and your armor amp. So this is a huge difference. You really want to make sure early on that you get these values and roll them to a decent place. Now, when it comes to suffixes, like I just said, in early stages, there are some suffixes that you want to hit, and there's some suffixes that don't really matter. And for what it is worth, all we really care about is getting a fire, a cold, a lightning, a poison, any of those resistance modifiers. Chaos resist is a really good one to hit here. Outside of that, there are no suffixes that are important to early game. Later on, you're going to do a thing where you could have 4 prefixes and 2 suffixes, and there's some really strong suffixes. And if you want to do the next step, you can. I'm going to show this from 2 different step points, or two different resource amounts. So right now, we'd take this and we would try to get some resistances. Okay, so we got 1. We're just going to suffix birth essence. There we got a lightning, attack block. Nope, another one. We're just getting horrendous here. Poison resist, hit point regen. Come on, just give me 2 resists. Don't be a jerk. Chaos resist and a fire. There we go. Chaos resist and fire resist. We'd probably just take this. It doesn't matter that much. Getting resistances from here is great. Don't spend a ton of resources trying to get a really optimal suffix, because it doesn't matter that much early game. Now, if you do want to go for a slightly better choice that costs more, you can. The authority modifier, I'm going to forget which one it is. Give me a moment. Where is... There's 2 that we want to look at here, and I can't remember where either of them are. Give me a moment. Okay. So the first one we could potentially take here is reflect damage. Now, reflect damage on its own is useless, but reflect damage turns into damage amplification, much like the helmet's critical damage did. So if you want to get a little bit of damage out of this, you can, and you still keep the prefixes being very defensive. So we'll say that we're going to go for that. The other option is the Hamal hit point amplification. And again, this is not super important and generally not worth the resources on a beginner chess piece. But for the purposes of showing you a better version that you could work for later, I'll show you how to do this because it's very easy. So once we've got our prefixes, we would have our suffixes cleared still. Okay, if you were going to try to do this, you wouldn't bother putting them on. You would change your authority by legendary, change the authority to the boreal, and then reversion. And now we have that damage, reflect damage that we want, and we would roll until we get the reflect damage, which hopefully we'll just take a couple of rolls here because it's fairly high chance to get. Now, if you get it and some resistances, awesome, even better. So there's our reflect damage. Now, much like the helmet, this value has to be at least tier 8. You can't get amp unless it is tier 8. So in that case, we're just going to keep re-rolling because it's much better than trying to do it with a Vesper, because we would screw up our prefixes, which are nearly perfect. So we're just going to do this until we get a... There we go. We got at least an 8. The other 2 suck, but we don't care. You would roll until you get your resistances. After that, the process remains the same as the other. You would make sure you pineapple these to good values. Okay, the damage amp, actually in this case they're already pretty good, so we're just going to take it. But you would pineapple to get your most important modifiers, in this case let's say the damage taken dampening, to its maximum. And these would have to be nice and high as well. So you pick your main one, pineapple, and then if look at it, so if I hit 15 and this is an 887, we would roll it again because that's not what we want. Once you've got that, you can legendary, and as always, you're just going to cross your fingers and hope for the best. Most of the modifiers on armor pieces, the prefixes are going to be exactly the same. You're either going to want hit points, element, resist, or armor. In this case, hopefully we get armor, so I can show the difference between hitting the armor or not. And then the suffixes on chess piece, there's actually some really good ones here. Melee attack skill rune level is great if you are melee. Hit point amplification, any of the percentage resists are really nice, but early on, you're just going to take what you can get. We got melee attack skill rune level, which is amazing if you are a melee player. That's exactly what you want to hit. The other thing we really want to worry about here is something we didn't care about as much on the helmet, which is quality essence. So we're at 7,200. I'm going to set this to roll for 8 or higher. Ping, ping. Generally, 8 or higher is what you want to aim for. Early on, you don't want to spend a lot of resources getting these things, but the 8 or higher is pretty easy to get. It's like a 2% chance or something. And you'll have lots of these things. So going for an 8 or higher on a piece where it's going to make a big difference is something that you want to do. And of course, it's going to take forever because it's a video. You're mean, game. You're so mean. Anytime I try to do a video, it's like, no, you don't get to do the thing. Meanwhile, off camera, when I'm on stream, I do the most ridiculous luck. I'm going to speed this part up. There we go. We got a 9. Okay. And the other one we want is quality modification essence. Again, these are harder to get, but you want to try to get, let's say, 13 or higher. Again, if we go in and look, 13 is a 5%. You could probably even go to 14. But again, don't waste a ton of these on this, but you want to get the value as high as you can get. 6. There's a 19. And again, 7,200 to 8,100. So that's 900 extra base armor by just getting the quality on there. Very important stuff. Getting a jewel socket and crafting is the only other thing we would do. If you decided to go with the hit points, there is nothing to worry about crafting here. If you really want to make something good, go for it. But early on, you don't want to waste a lot of crafting materials on something that isn't going to be very important. In this case, you could do gear armor percent and try to get more gear armor percent. If you've gone with the reflect damage, you want to re-roll the reflect damage into physical damage amplification. So that's what we're going to do here. Generally, it won't take a lot of resources. I don't have a lot on me. I have a disgusting amount stored, but let's see if we can get it here. Of course not. There we go. Physical damage amplification. That's all we were aiming for. That's all we were aiming for. So we got it. There's our chest piece done. We throw a white jewel on this and we're done. That's basic chest piece. Now, the other thing I didn't talk about because I completely forgot about it is the authority modifier. On chest piece, there are some really good authority modifiers that once it is legendary, you can come back and do. Depending on the piece, I think it's Spica, no, it's Seftar. So Seftar has more dampen damage taken, which is a great one to get. If you are low on dampen damage, or if your dampen damage, if your damage dampening is low, you can take this. The other options are gear item quality, which will give you more armor, or you can go with chaos resist from a bunch of the different mods. So there's chaos resist there. If you are low on chaos resist, it's a great spot to get it. Dampen damage is a great thing to get. There's a lot of good stuff. But there's our chest piece done. Moving on to the next one. Next up, we have boots. Boots are one of the very few spots where you are absolutely going to be using a hybrid if you're going to be trying to make a good boot. Now, there's crazy, ridiculous other boots that you can make or you can find that maybe you want. But boot is one of the spots where you specifically want armor barrier, and it's the one spot where you don't want a higher tier. The tier 35s are actually not what I want. And it's very odd that you're going to want either a tier 34 or a tier 33. Now, once you get to the higher values, you can't get the tier 33. But the reason we want it is movement skill, cooldown, recovery speed, implicit. It's not available on the later ones, and the implicits on the later ones suck. And because the base armor and barrier is so low, it is not even worth trying to get the higher ones because it makes no difference to your character. Just ineligibly small. I don't know why I said that word. It's impossibly small. It's stupid. So tier 33 or tier 34, it does not matter which one you get. Don't aim, don't go nuts trying to get, as long as it is armor barrier, because armor barrier has a specific mod that we are going to want to make use of. So we get our thing, we got our move speed, tier 33 or tier 34, and we're going to start with suffixes. A lot of the other ones we started with prefixes, we're going to be starting with suffixes on this one. Now, there's two ways to go, much like with the chess piece, if you want to go offensive or you want to go defensive. In this case, it matters less. With the chess piece, typically I go with the dampen damage starting out, and then I come back later and I go with one of the either attack or spell rune level. In this case, it's totally up to you if you want to go offense or defense. It's not going to make much of a difference. The options are dampen damage taken, much like the other one, up to 8%-ish on tier 13 mod. And the other one is the Cathsor attack enhanced skill rune effect for 37%, which is going to give you a lot on your enhanced skill. Now we went damage dampening on the other one, so we're going to go attack enhanced skill rune on this one. So Cathsor authority, and that's going to be our first move. We're going to start suffixes, so we're going to look at the suffixes we want. We know we want this one. The other one we want is totem effect range. Totem effect range sounds crazy. Maybe you use totems, maybe you don't. Either way, you want totem effect range. We are going to use this as a crafting option, much like we did on the other two. So that's our second one. Third one basically doesn't matter here. If you get a resist, cool, take the resist. If you get hit rate, cool, take the hit rate. But it really doesn't matter for a base level setup for boots. So those are the only two that matter. We're going to roll until we get one. I'm going to coin until I hopefully get the second one. Nope. Back to the first. Roll. Now, you could... Hey, there we go, I got it. You could, like some people, just set it to roll 2, and it'll roll and blow all of your money, and then you'll go, I don't know why I'm out of snakes. And anytime somebody says they ran out of snakes, I feel like you're probably doing it wrong. So that didn't take long. They're both very high options, 8% chance to hit them. And the third one, again, doesn't really matter. If you get a resist, cool. You can do things with that. If you get something that sucks, like, what is it, gear stat requirement, that's, who cares? If you happen to get really crazy and get lucky and get movement speed does not fall below base value, awesome. But it is a 0.2% chance, so don't hold your breath. We got our two values. We take a look at what we've got and decide if we're going to Vesper at this point. I highly recommend Vespering at this point. So remove the prefixes and Vesper just these three. Now, some cases, you're going to really worry about the values of the other modifiers. On a base level starter boot, the things we are going to try to get on prefix, move speed, is a very 8% chance you're going to roll it. So rolling a high value on it is really easy. And getting the other modifiers that you want on prefix don't matter that much at this point in the game. So we would Vesper here. Ideally, we want 13, 12, maybe 11 on the thing. So we're going to re-roll with Vespers until we get the totem and the attack enhance at decent values. So at least double digits, ideally 11 or higher. So there we go, 10 to 13, good enough for now. 2 13s and a 10. So we've got our suffixes, now we're going to go for prefixes. You could look through and see that there's a bunch of potentially good prefixes, but they're not worth it at this point. It's really not worth trying to get the 0.9% strike damage because you're going to waste a huge amount of resources trying to get a very small difference to your build at this point. So we're just going to take what we can get on prefixes. So let's take a look at what our options are. We got hit point, we got hit rate, move speed obviously is going to be one of the other ones we want. There's a chance to get melee damage or area damage. If either of those is something you are going to go for, great, take it. Perfect dodge is really strong late game. but I don't recommend trying to get perfect dodge. If you get it, that's fine, but I wouldn't worry about trying to get either one. So really, I would take hit point, hit rate, either of the damages if they apply to you, and then the move speed. Okay, so one of those, any of those three. In this case, we're just going to see what we can get. Didn't get our move speed, so again, we're going to be using prefix removal, or prefix option, birth essence, and prefix removals here. So we're going to do this until we see move speed. There's a tier 10 move speed, and we can take a look at what the difference between the tier 10 and the tier 13 are. So tier 10 move speed, 40%, tier 12 at this case, because it can't go higher for some reason than 12, is 48. So it's only 8% move speed difference. If the other modifiers are good, you take it. You take it. In this case, the other modifiers aren't good. We're going to do a couple more. Barrier. Nope. Totem, or not totem effect range. Hit rate, area damage, and a 12 on move speed. We're going to take it. Okay, this is probably a best case scenario if you have area damage tag. If you don't have area damage tag, that's not going to do anything for you. Re-roll it. Try to get hit points or something. So now we've got our thing done. We did great. We moved so fast. The next step, same rare change essence. Roll your values until you get what you want. In this case, we would want attack enhance, skill rune effect at the most, and movement speed at the most. They're both pretty close. I'm not going to bother re-rolling it. We have the legendary, same options with all the armor. Hit point, element resist, armor, or sorry, hit point or element resist, prefix, and suffix. There's not really anything super important, so you just kind of hope you get hit points, really. Legendary, we got barrier, which sucks because it makes this go up by hardly anything at all. Perfect attack dodge isn't bad, though. Next step, jewel, and crafting. And the crafting is very easy. I don't have any crafting material. Actually, hold on. Yeah, I do. What am I talking about? I got tons. Let's grab some. There we go. So, crafting, you're going to take the totem that we crafted. Where's my boots? Where's my boots? There. So, the totem, we are going to roll it until we get skill rune effect. Skill rune effect. Every time I try to do a video on stream. We're going to want skill rune effect. Skill rune effect affects your attack enhanced skill and your defense enhanced skill if you happen to use one. And if you're not, what are you doing? We're going to re-roll here. Shouldn't take long to get a decent value on attack enhance, or the enhance. In this case, it's going to take a while because this game's a jerk. Come on. So I've talked about that crafting is the most tedious part of this process by a huge. There we go. Tier 10, as good as you can get, skill rune effect. That's what we want. And there's our boots. We're done. Throw a white jewel on these things. Now, you'll see that I didn't bother doing the quality. Don't bother with the quality. It's literally not worth your money. If you got this to absolute max value, the armor would be like 240 or something. It's absolutely not worth your resources, especially at this level. And even at very high level, it makes such a tiny difference that it's really not worth it. Okay, so we're done those. We've got 2 more armor pieces, and I think we're going to do gloves next. Next up, we have gloves. Now, gloves are really here for one purpose when you're starting out, okay? And that's either attack or cast speed. And when it comes to the implicit that you're going to look for, much like the helmet? Yes, the helmet. We're going to want to take an implicit that gives us either element penetration if you're a barrier build, or sorry, not even if you're a barrier build. You could do this. Yeah, you could. You could do barrier with element penetration or armor with physical penetration, armor penetration. Or if you really are having trouble with mana, you could do a resource cost dampening glove. And those are basically the only 3 worth looking at. Now, it's again, the difference between a tier 33 here and a tier 34 is very minuscule. The implicit is probably more important. Since this build so far that I've been testing has, or not testing, that I've been building for, God, I got the hiccup so bad. Since we've been working with physical the whole time so far, we're going to take the armor gloves and go with armor penetration. So, gloves, again, are here for attack speed or cast speed. That's their main focus. Now, there's a couple of things we can do here, and this is another one where it's probably worth using your other reversion to get a second, what they called, authority modifier. We did it on the helmet, and since you get 2 of them from doing the quests, this is a good place to use the second, assuming you haven't picked up one of the selection boxes that gives you one of the really good gloves. So we're going to look at the authorities, and the prefix authorities here have a lot of oomph in regards to flat damage. There are very few places in the game where you can get flat damage for your character, and flat damage is very strong. I talk about it quite a bit in my videos over the base of a pyramid can only go, or the height of a pyramid is based on the base of the pyramid. Wider the base, taller the pyramid. And your damage is a pyramid with all of your base value, your weapon damage, and your flat damage at the bottom, and then it goes up as high as you can go. This is a great place to get your base damage. So Cathsor has fire, cold, lightning, and poison, and then one of the other ones has physical, I don't know which one it is off the top of my head. There it is, Seftar. And we're physical, so we're going to go with that. That's going to be our one prefix that we definitely want. It's a pretty decent chance to get it. Sometimes the flat values are really difficult to get, like on weapon. In this case, it's not. So we're going to do Seftar first, and we're going to start with our prefixes. You can also start with the suffixes here, because the suffixes are also something we really care about, especially if you are a critical build. In this case, we're going to assume that we are a critical build. Pretty much every really good build in the game is critical. I know right now the bleed build is huge and it's not critical, but just assume that we're going to be a critical build pretty much in every situation, unless you're using dots or minions or sentry or whatever. So we're going to do it with that in mind. The authority mod we want for suffixes is on Aquila. And Aquila gives us either attack speed amplification or cast speed amplification, and it's a decent amount, especially starting out. So if you're having trouble with getting your attack speed up and you don't want to have to be forced to use a link rune for it, this is a great place to get the attack speed, and that's what we're going to go with. So we'll start with the prefixes. Like I said, we're going to get our flat physical from the Seftar. Yeah, so now we have that modifier on there, and we're good to go. The other modifiers we'd like to get on here is attack speed. If you do the barrier version of the glove, if you're doing an element build, you would get cast speed instead of attack speed on here. But we want attack speed, we want physical, and then again, generally it doesn't matter too much what your third modifier is. Hit points or armor percent are both really good options. But in this case, we don't really care too much. We're just starting out. So we're going to take these two, roll it until it hits one of those, and then coin, and hopefully get our second one. If we don't, go right back to the snakes and re-roll. Attack speed with a open spot. Physical damage. There we go. So we got our attack speed, our damage, and we got hit rate, which is solid. That easy. We're done the first step. Second step, we got to change the authority. And again, this is the one time I sort of recommend doing this. Legendary upgrade essence. Change the authority to Aquila. Bam. And reversion. Now we have on our suffixes the ability to get our attack speed amplification. Make sure you don't pick cast speed amplification when you are trying to do this if you are an attack speed person, because you'll see the amplification and your brain will go, yes, that's the one I want. And then you'll be like, that's totally wrong. And you'll have it complete and wasted a bunch of resources. I've never done that personally, wink, but it happens. So we're going to try to get a few things here. If you are a critical build, you're going to be wanting critical rate or attack critical rate, or spell critical rate, if you're those. The difference between critical rate and attack critical rate and spell critical rate is critical rate applies to everything, and therefore the value is lower. So if you are trying to optimize, you shouldn't be worrying about it at this point, but if you're trying to be an attack build, use attack critical rate if you can. So we're just going to roll a few here. There's our critical damage. That's one of the ones we want. So we could, at this point, since we have one of the three we want, use suffix option removal essence. Yeah, what the heck, we'll go for it. But we're looking for, there's, see, critical damage, critical rate, and chaos resist. Now, if you are a build that doesn't need the attack speed or don't currently care too much about attack speed, this is probably best bet right here, because we have the critical damage, critical rate, and chaos resist. And you'll notice I didn't bother Vespering at 3, because you really want to hit this and the attack speed amp, or the cast, or the attack speed, or the cast speed, or whatever you're aiming for. In this case, we are going to try to get the amp, just because. Not that it matters for the character at all, because I've got way better stuff. There's cast speed amplification. Don't fall for it. It's a trick. Cast speed amplification again. The other thing to note, I should have brought this up earlier. Certain things are mutually exclusive, and when you are trying to roll for certain things, you can't get other things. In this case, if cast speed amplification is on, you can't get attack speed amplification. So this is blocking you from getting what you want. So if you see this, just immediately re-roll. Bam, bam. Bam. There's our attack speed amp at a high value. We're going to try to immediately remove it, because that's obviously what's going to happen. You can't do a video where the thing works properly. So there's attack critical rate. We'll try to, there's our attack speed amplification. So now the mana regen is not great, but we're going to take this. Because I don't want to waste a ton of resources on stuff. So this is what we've got. This is all great stuff. You can get dot amp as a, what? I just realized that's crazy. There's our stuff. Okay, now this mana regen on its own sucks, but we haven't planned anything to be crafted. So what happens typically is you'll end up with, early on, 5 modifiers that are good, or 4 modifiers that are good, and 2 that are kind of meh. And if you get a meh one in this case, like mana regen, we can craft that into something else good later. So now that we've got our 6 modifiers, this is the one time early on that I say Vesper 6, because you want to hit the physical damage and the attack speed amplification ideally fairly high. So we're taking that right away. We got 11 and a 13. The other ones are all decent, except for the mana regen, which we don't care about anyway. So we're going to take that. Steps follow as normal. Use the rare change essence to re-roll the things that matter the most. Both of these are very good to begin with, so we're just going to take that. We do a legendary and hopefully get the stuff we want. Hit point, element resist, armor, critical rate, hit damage, okay? Gear armor, cool, we'll take it. And we could re-roll the implicit value into something we want. Depending what you were looking for here, there's a lot of good options when it comes to gloves. Armor penetration, if you are still low, is a good choice. Again, there's other penetrations if you're going for those. Where is the other one? I know there's one that's attack. There it is. Attack, aura, and seal effect is not a bad choice. And damage itself is also not a bad choice. But we're just going to go with whatever we hit here. Make sure it is legendary before you do this. So there we got damage. And now we can go look to see what we're going to do for crafting. Again, we got that mana that we don't really want. So we'll go find our glove here and use some very, very low amount of stuff to see if there's anything that this can turn into that we would take. Ah, I didn't read it. It's not turned off. You can't use that word. He put anal in the word. So we're going to try to re-roll this into something we want. There's armor, there's physical damage, there's dodge rate. As long as it's something we care about, we'll take it. So we're just going to roll Movement speed increase, not really something that's particularly important. There we go. Low level physical damage, who cares? It's something as opposed to just some mana regen. And that's it. That's the gloves. Now, on gloves, if you are doing either a pure dodge or a pure barrier or a pure armor, the quality can make a bit of a difference. So you do want to put quality on it. But again, unless your modifiers, one of your prefixes is the percentage-based base modifier. So in this case, armor percent, it's not going to make that much of a difference. You would want to make sure you get quality on it, but let's, here, there's a, hold on, let's do this one. It's faster. So right now we're at 634. If I get a decent quality on here, it goes up to 743. Not that much more. Unless you have, again, the flat modifier, or sorry, the percentage-based modifier for the base thing. And again, throw a jewel in it and you're good to go. This physical damage is going to be a good increase. The attack speeds are both nice. And that's a basic glove thrown together. Now, almost always, you're going to get a unique selection box during the season where you're just going to take a better, because there's a whole bunch of good gloves, and you almost always won't end up doing it, but I do want to show every single slot for the thing. Okay, last one we've got is shoulders, which is the least exciting one, so that's why I left it for last. Okay. So, next up, last of the armor pieces is the shoulder. Now, shoulder is defensive. That's it. Don't even try unless you're talking about a forge or non-forge version of forge modifiers and the 165 level gear. Shoulders are defensive, and that's it. There is no reason to try and get any kind of damage on these things. Now, since we did an armor chest piece, and assuming we're a standard type build, we still need quite a bit of dodge rate, and this is a great place to get it. Now, if you did the opposite, if you did a dodge chest piece, you would do armor shoulders, because it's a great way to balance out the two and get a ton of defensive purpose out of this. So in this case, we're going to go with a pure dodge shoulder. There's honestly not much to be said about this. It's all defensive, and I don't know what other way to put it. So we are going to look at the modifiers, and on the prefixes, there's not a single prefix that does damage. There's not. In any way. Don't even look at it. So perfect world here, we want dodge rate percent and hit point. And that's what we're going to aim for. So we're going to go 2 and re-roll until we get 2 and a open spot, and then coin and try to get the third one. And we're going to do that until we get it. Ping, ping. So there we go. We got it. Dodge rate, hit points. Remove the suffixes. Vesper until we get good values. Boop. 10 and a 13. There we go. Armor's nice and high. And then we go for suffixes. Now, when it comes to suffixes, there are a couple that are like worth trying to get. If in this case we're physical damage, you could try to get physical damage. It is not a lot of physical damage for more effort than it is worth. So since we're talking basically being purely defensive, all we're going to really aim for is resistances. That's it. So hopefully we can get chaos resist, because it's a good chunk of chaos resist. Lightning, cold, fire, and hit rate. If you happen to get the physical, great. That's what we want to see. But let's see what we get here. Chaos resist, poison resist, lightning resist. Perfect. We're taking it. That's it. We're done. That's the shoulder. That's a starter shoulder. There's no reason to even attempt to try and get any oomph out of shoulders early on in the story. It's not worth the effort for the tiny amount of gain. There are ways to make shoulders that have a little bit of offense, but it's not worth the effort. So here's our shoulder. We take our legendary, we throw it on. Hopefully, in this case, since we're trying to get as much dodge as you can out of it, hopefully you get the dodge percent, because it'll make a big difference. You throw some quality on this thing. I'm not going to bother. And we get an authority, and the one authority we do want here is enhanced skill rune cooldown recovery speed from Alyssa, because it's up to 15%. And once it's legendary, that's what we try to get. Come on. Really, don't be like this. There we go. Enhanced skill cooldown recovery speed. Then you're done. That's it. If you really want to try and get more defense out of it, which I don't recommend because it's not worth it for a basic shoulder, you can do dodge rate and try to hit more dodge rate. Because if you hit it, it's a good amount of dodge. There we go. We got more dodge rate. That's it. Move on. You're done. Shoulders are not almost ever worth crafting unless it's extremely specific endgame stuff. And part of that has to do with uniques. All of the best items in the game are shoulders. The most broken piece in the game is the Leo's Animosity shoulder. If I can click the right thing. So this shoulder's broken, that shoulder's broken, that one's crazy good, that one's crazy good, this one's crazy good. There's no reason to go nuts trying to build a good shoulder. Take defenses, so dodge, or armor, hit points, and then resistances. Get the authority mod and move on with your life. Don't waste a lot of resources on shoulders. Okay, so next we've got, we'll do shield next because it's technically an armor piece. And then we're going to talk about jewelry and weapons. Next up, we got shield. Now, not everyone's going to use the shield, and end game, very people. I said what I said, just, okay? Very few people in end game use shields, and if they are, it's almost always going to be a unique. But early on, maybe you want to use a shield. Certain builds, like Shield Strike, require a shield, so I might as well talk about making a decent beginner one. And it's really easy, because there's only really one authority modifier we care about, and it's totem. Now, there's two different totem options, because totem is totem. Okay, so totem max hit point regen, or what's the other one? Totem element resist. Where is it? I just passed it a second ago and I already forgot where there it is. So Akuben or Miracetti, doesn't really matter, okay? Because they're going to give you the same options. So Totem is going to become skill rune effect, so we're going to put that on. And when it comes to what base you want for a shield, it's going to depend on what you're low on. If you are a armor chest piece, dodge shoulder, and your dodge is lower, go with a dodge shield. If your armor's lower, go with an armor shield. It doesn't really matter. If you're a barrier user, generally you're going to end up needing the armor more. So we're going to do an armor shield because that's more likely what you're going to end up taking, because you're going to generally want more armor, and shields are a great way to get a lot of armor, because for what it's worth, this will roll the same way as a chest piece does in regards to how much oomph you're going to get from it. So prefixes are pretty straightforward here. We are going to want gear armor and gear armor percent, and then we are going to want decrease damage taken. Another great source of a huge amount of dampened damage. The other option is to go with armor percent and gear block expertise, and then dodge decrease damage taken. Block expertise is exactly what it sounds like. It's the chance that you have to block. There's not a huge amount of reason to take this over just armor, unless you already have really high armor. In this case, we do, so we are going to take the block expertise. Block expertise is something that you can offset quite heavily later in the game with your Rune Master points, but we're talking about early game, so let's assume that we want that block expertise. So we are going to, is there, there's a separate block expertise that's a mod, and it's so much lower. Oh no, that's bait, it's percent. Never mind, don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. So you don't get the flat block expertise from the authority modifier. So we got our 3, standard procedure, set it to 2, roll until you get 2, coin to get the 3rd. And we're gonna do that, shouldn't take long. Gear armor. Now, if we happen to hit the other armor at this point, I'll probably just take it. But let's assume we're trying to go for block expertise. There we go, all three. Damage taken decrease, gear armor, block expertise. Those are our prefixes. Done. Cool. Now, again, as always, you could Vesper at this point. I'm not going to. I'm gonna... Well, no, because, yeah, I'm gonna Vesper at this point. Because we really want to make sure we get that damage taken decrease. I don't know why, but that's what we're gonna try to get here. Couple of Vespers. Ugh, super low on the armor. Low on the block expertise. Keep going. Come on, give me double digits. There we go. Triple 13s. Perfect. Literally perfect. So, on to the suffixes. Same procedure. Suffix, birth, option, essence, coins, and removals. And we're going to want to hit the totem element resist. And then, generally, just 2 resists. Unfortunately, much like I always say, this needs to be a fairly high value because this is going to turn into something we want. So even though we did get the totem element resist, we want it at a 10, 11, 12, 13 kind of thing. So we're going to re-roll. When it comes to the other stuff on here, there is physical damage. If you get it, cool. It's not particularly high chance. Or is it? Hold on. Is it a suffix? Where is it? Physical damage. It's 7%. Never mind. Try to get physical damage. If you're a physical user. Chaos resist is another one that we want to get here. Chaos resist is always the resist that's going to be the hardest to get up. So great place to get it. Totem element resist again at 6. We don't want it at a 6. We want it higher. Bam. Bam. Earth. I don't even know what that mod is. Lightning resist when you block? What a weird mod. So there's an 8. A little better. Still not what we're looking for, though. 6. You're kidding me with this. Come on. Lightning resist when blocking. What an absolutely weird mod. Bug the streamer. Get it? Bug the streamer. But I don't have the visuals on, so you couldn't actually see the bug. Come on. Just give me a lightning or an element, a totem element at a higher level so I can get the thing we're trying to get. I keep getting the lightning, but not the... This is just silly video. It's supposed to be quick. There's an 8. Another 8. So the thing you want to, if you're running into a situation like this, the thing you should check that I didn't check is to make sure that it can actually roll to the higher things. In certain cases, you can only get certain level mods. The chest piece, we were talking about the attack skill rune level. It can only go to 10. So don't try to roll higher than that. So I didn't bother to check, but yes, this can go up to 13. So we are gonna at least try to get a decent one here. So this is the only damage we are gonna get off of this shield, is this mod. So it's important to get this mod fairly high if you can. Yeah, you're my fluffiest boy. Hi. Yes. I see. Oh, full headbutt. Broke some ribs. Hi. You're very fluffy. Are you gonna give me some luck? Sometimes he gives luck. Sometimes he steps on the mouse and I get a good mod. Totem element resist. My God. Ah! Put him on a timer. Oh, for food? Yep, he's not happy. He wants more food. He always wants more food. I can't believe this is taking this long. Again, normally a mod like this, you're gonna hit fairly quickly. So don't use this as a metric for making a basic shield. Come on. I can't believe how many times we've hit the totem at not the right level. Okay, we're taking it. We're taking it, okay? So here we got physical damage, we got totem element resist, and Same procedures as always. Pineapple, your values. So in this case, your dampen damage taken, your armor. Roll them till you get what you want. And then we're going to legendary, and with much like the armor pieces, hit point, element resist, blah, blah, blah. Damage amplification is the best you want to get here. We got reflect damage amplification, worthless. Can't do anything about it. And we're not going to bother. Again, you could reversion if you had a higher level piece and you wanted to go for it, you could do it. But we're going to just take that. The authority mods are not particularly great on this thing. Generally, you're just going to take something like armor or hit points. There's a few that do damage, I think, or gear item quality to get more stuff. Make sure you quality, because much like the chess piece, the quality matters quite a bit here. And get a jewel into it, and then we're going to craft the totem into skill rune effect, which will translate directly to more damage from our enhanced skill. So skill rune effect right there, and we would roll until we get that, which again shouldn't take too long. The cost on this, because it is a lower tier thing, is not particularly high. There we go. Skill rune effect. It can only go to 8, so we got 6. We're going to take that. And there is our shield. So next up, we're going to do the jewelry. Okay, so jewelry includes ring, amulet, and belt. And really, depending on what you're doing, you have options for necklace and ring. But when it really comes down to it, the belt has one option, which is potion belt. And I'm going to show how to make the most baby version of the potion belt that you can possibly make, so that you could get moving into deeper stuff using a baby potion belt, and then you can get the materials to make a proper potion belt. And then I'm just going to talk, you can find my potion belt video if you want to make the full version. Okay, moving on. So let's talk about jewelry. We're going to start with a ring. Now, I wish I had got a ring that gave us stats, because that's generally what you're going to want to use. There are other good options for the tier 34 and tier 33. One of the good options for tier 33, at least until it's not accessible anymore, is the flat physical damage. If you're a physical user, the flat physical damage ring. I literally just sucked in a water Statler for, God, woo! I saw it floating coming in. Ugh. Okay, I'll try to cut that out. Woo! Flat physical ring is ideal if you're physical, but otherwise just go with stats. Now the reason leave it in, okay, we'll leave it in. Me sucking in a wad of cat hair. The reason you want the flat physical and then the stats are something that early on don't feel like they make much of a difference, but in the much later end of the game, stats become really important. Getting to 500 of a stat or stacking a certain stat to get bonuses is very important. So getting stats early on a ring, especially if you get like a 15 stat base, that's 45 total stats. That's 15 strength, 15 dex, 15 int. Worth having. As for modifiers on these rings, we're just going to use this ring. It doesn't matter, because all of the modifiers, unless it's a minion piece specifically. So I know I saw one. Where did I see that? Up here? Was it a 34? Did I pass it? I know I saw it. I'm not crazy. You're crazy. There it is, minion. So unless you use a minion base, all of the stats are going to be the same. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what we use here for our demo purposes. Rings have a crazy amount of good modifiers, and we're going to flip through here. So first of them is just straight damage amplifications. So there is damage amplification when strength and dex are 300 or more. There is damage amplification when dex and int, and then strength and dex, and they're all 300. There's also the 500s, which are the same except 500 of one stat. If you are going to pick one of these, go with the ones that are 300, because for whatever reason, they give more amp than the other one does. Why did they do it like that? I don't know, but that's a thing. So that's going to be generally one of the modifiers you want on your prefix on your ring. It's just straight damage amplification. The other one we potentially are going to want is totem. Now, totem, as we've seen in the other pieces, crafts into skill rune effect, which affects your enhance. They really need to change the wording on it to enhance skill rune effect so it stops confusing people. Anyway, totem duration turns into skill rune effect. Now, straight damage amplification versus skill rune effect is something that you can debate. The one is going to give you more amplification. The skill rune effect is going to give you more amplification, but it's only effective while the attack enhanced skill is on. So generally, especially earlier in the game, it's better to just go with one of the stat-based straight damage amplifications. So in this case, we'll probably end up going with a strength and dex one because we're a physical build. That's what we're pretending we are for the purposes of this. So there's our, that's not the right one. Was it the first one? Strength and dex, there it is. So that's what we're gonna go with. We're gonna get them all. Now, this is one of the few times that it's very important that we start with prefix if we're trying to get this, because this is a 0.24% chance of getting this modifier. So rolling this naturally is going to take a huge amount of resources, but we're going to use an Alyssa essence to force this modifier on. Now, we also want to look at the suffixes on these because eventually we are going to want a suffix. Fortunately, on ring, there is only really one that's worth trying to get early on. Obviously, later we could do some really crazy stuff with these, but it's basically to get pain effect. And pain effect is the thing that makes enemies take more damage. It's very strong, especially early on, and especially if you don't have another source of it, although they can stack. So we're going to try to use a thing. Now, if you've used a reversion already on other pieces of gear, you're not going to be able to do two different authorities. And in that case, I'll show you what I would do in case, but I'm going to assume that either you can farm yourself one by getting one from the dismantle shop, okay, getting 7,000 Croco fragments, or 7,500 Croco fragments, and buying one, and then you can do this, or just potentially having one from another source, but I'll show both versions anyway. So we're going to put the Hamal for the amp. That's our first thing we do. Then we're going to take a look at what we have in terms of options. Now, we're playing a pretend physical build, so our amp's here, and then we're going to want to try to get either physical damage or area damage or melee damage or projectile damage, any of those. They are all mutually exclusive. I've already talked about mutual exclusivity. So if I tried to take physical damage and element, it's going to say no. If I try to take physical damage and area, it's going to say no. You have to pick one. Now, if your build has multiple tags, if you are a physical melee, then physical and melee. If you're a physical, melee, and area, any of those three will work. So really, you just want to hit one of those, the damage amp, and then let's say attack speed. If you need the attack speed, hit point, hit rate, whatever your case. So there's our prefixes. Now, because the first one, the damage amp, is very difficult to roll, we are going to use Alyssa essences. We're going to select the amplification and hit it. And it's going to roll that guaranteed. It's going to put it on. This is where the disintegration essences come in really handy. We are going to try and remove the prefixes we don't want and hopefully get a free spot. So if we hit the barrier in this case, we hit the attack speed, that's fine. Try to put it back on. We got area damage. I'm going to assume we're a fissure user, so the area damage is fine. We're going to try to remove the disintegration, or use the disintegration to remove the barrier. It hit the barrier, and we're going to coin. We got hit point. In this case, I would take it, okay? If you really are super, I gotta get whatever. If you really need attack speed, get the second attack speed. In this case, I would take this. This is a solid beginner ring. Hit points are always going to be handy early on because getting hit points will get you deeper into the game. If you can get deeper into the game, you can get to the better stuff, get better resources, and then build better gear. So we're going to take this. Now, Knowing that our suffix is something we care about, we have to decide if we have enough Vespers to risk trying to roll to get a higher value on the other. In this case, when it comes to this particular piece of gear, rings, I wouldn't worry about getting a high value on the pain effect. The difference between a low level pain effect and a high level pain effect is not that much of a difference. So we are going to remove these suffixes and we're going to Vesper and try to get these up. As always, make sure that your values can go higher. This can only go to 12. It can't go to 13. So the others can go to 13, but this one can only go to 12. So we're hoping to hit a 12 and then something decent. I'm not going to continue to roll this because I don't want to waste a bunch of Vespers on nothing. So there we go. And then we're going to look at what we do next. If we want to get the pain effect, we have to do the legendary, change the authority, and come back. If we're just going to take the current stuff, there is some decent effects in here. So int stat, int strike dex. Now you could get all three if you wanted. You could get stat and strength and dex because you're trying to get to 300 for the prefix. So getting stats on the suffixes is not bad. There is also the standard stuff of critical rate, critical damage, attack critical rate. Any of those are good. Typically, I don't say go for resistances here because the resistances, there's better options to get. When it comes to the pieces where I say your shoulder or your chest piece, the suffixes on the chest don't have a lot of offensive modifiers, whereas ring does. So I wouldn't settle for resistances here, and I would try to go for 2 or 3 offensive ones. So if we were going to do that without using the pain effect, we would just coin and then start doing suffix birth essence and hoping to get some offensive ones or some stats. So sentry overpower effect is useless to us. Let's say we want to keep those are both pretty good rolls. So we got rid of that. Hit point regen per second, not really something you probably would want to keep. So now we've removed the strength, and the int's not particularly something we want. Roll again. There we got stats. Gold gain, Stats on its own is good, but not worth trying to get rid of 2 things. Dexterity. Fire resist, Anyways, so you would do this, you would try to get your, again, the critical damage. Again, keep in mind that critical damage, even if you don't want the critical damage, any critical damage can roll into physical damage amplification. So that's something you would ideally like to hit, and it's a fairly high chance to hit it, so that's something you would want. So let's say this is good enough, right? Okay, we take it. I would keep the stats. I would roll the critical damage into amplification. As long as it is tier 8 or higher, in this case it is a 6, we would have to get higher. But let's assume we want the pain effect because the pain effect is very strong. So legendary, hold on, wait, make sure we know what the authority is because I don't remember off the top of my head. Vesper, okay. So, legendary, get your authority, change it to Vesper, reversion, and now we have the ability to get pain from the suffix. So we're gonna roll and hopefully get fairly quickly pain effect here. But of course, because it's a video, it's gonna take me 100 attempts. Sharpness effect is also not a terrible thing. If you are a crit user, it's not great. I'd like to point it out. It's not nearly as good as it used to be back in the day, but sharpness is also not terrible if you happen to get it. There's critical damage, but again, low value. Also, it's talking about mutually exclusive things. If you get maximized chance, you cannot get critical chance. If you get critical damage, you cannot get maximized damage. They are mutually exclusive. Also, just to point out, pain effect is not super high chance to get. So if you are really low on resources, this is not something you would go for. But if you do want to spend that little bit more, this is definitely worth getting. Critical damage stats. Of course, we just can't hit anything here. This is horrendous. But again, this is going for the pain effect is something that you would only do if you have that extra little bit of resources. Otherwise, I would just take the stats and the critical chance and stuff if you can get them. Just give me one of the pain effect so I can move on. There we go. Pain effect. Tier 8, not particularly high effect, but also good. And critical rate. It's not super high values, but we would take it. Then we would Vesper, make sure or if we hadn't Vespered, if we were going for the suffixes, we wouldn't have Vespered the prefixes. If you aren't going to go for the pain effect, you would have Vespered the prefixes like I previously did. Then standard procedure. Roll pineapple to make sure the values are good. So this is 4.8. That's good. That only goes up to 18. Go to your legendary, see what the modifiers are. Hit points, attack speed, physical damage in the case of this, obviously, depending what you want. Suffixes, stat, element resist, attack critical, spell critical, blah, blah, blah. Legendary, hey, we got attack speed, cool. Now, when it comes to jewels, jewelry can have 2 sockets rolled natively. So, you want either a white and a red, or a white and a blue, or a white and a green. Generally, I would go with red, because red gives you attack enhanced skill rune effect, and it costs basically nothing. I thought I had one on me. Did I put it away? So I can show? It's another place to get a lot of oomph for very little resource. Oh, of course I do. Anyways, red jewels can roll attack enhanced skill rune effect, and if you are going to do jewelry at low level, it's worth throwing red jewels in there because red jewels cost basically nothing, and you can get 12 to 14% attack enhanced skill rune effect, which translates to a lot of damage. So once you've got your ring to there, you've rolled all the prefixes and suffixes. Where'd my ring go? So you've rolled all your prefixes and suffixes. You make sure you get your jewels. The other thing is the authority modifier. It is flat damage. There is one for each. There is fire, cold, lightning, poison, and then I think Scepter? Speaka? Speakle has flat physical. In this case, we would want that flat physical. Oh, wow, that's a nearly perfect roll. That's great. And not, of course, I get a nearly perfect roll on a time when I don't care. And then, again, if you went with the critical damage and you want to get a little more oomph out of it, you would find the critical damage and re-roll it into amp. Now, in this case, we could take the lightning resist and turn it into something else if we wanted. There's not a lot of good options. You could turn it into hit point percent. You could turn your hit points into physical damage if you wanted. There's some basic stuff, but nothing really important in terms of crafting. There is no quality to worry about with these, and the process is fairly straightforward, as you can see, and this is a much better thing. Now, I'm pretty confident, don't quote me on this, that you can't stack 2 ring pain effects. So if you do craft 2 rings, don't put pain effect on the second one, because I'm pretty confident they do not stack. I know a lot of pain effects do, but I don't think, because this is the exact same pain effect, it doesn't. I know you can get multiple pain effects on a character. I'm not 100% sure, but I wouldn't bother doing it, is what I'm saying. Okay, we got necklace next. Okay, necklace. Let's talk about necklace. Necklace is a really strong piece, and you can make these things really nutty at high level, but since we are low level, low resources, we're going to keep this as simple as possible. The only modifier we truly care about here is the Capri 10% chance to gain damage amp for 3 seconds on every hit, which means basically permanent uptime on amplification. So, Capri authority is the only authority we truly care about. There again are tons and tons and tons of ways to make these things really strong. Base level, it's not worth the amount of resources because it takes a ton of resources to make these things really strong. So we're going to start small. The modifiers we'd like to see are, again, flat physical damage. Flat physical is always going to be very strong. So we want flat physical damage percent, okay, for our prefixes. And our third prefix, there's a bunch of things: hit point percent, hit rate, the standard fare, that are all good. Also, if you happen to get stuck with any of the dodge chance, dodge chance, debuff dodge chance, or crowd control dodge chance as a prefix, you can craft those into critical rate or critical damage. So, not terrible if you get them. When it comes to suffixes, there's only two we really care about, and they're both fairly good to get. The one is a skill rune enhance, or skill rune cooldown recovery speed, okay, which can give you a little bit of cooldown recovery speed for your attack enhance and your defense enhance, as well as your movement and stuff. Fairly decent. Oh, your shouts as well. So worth getting if you can get it. And then our damage amp. There's also the standard stuff. Any of the stats, chaos resist, are all going to be solid. We're going to start with prefix because prefix has flat physical and it's quite low chance to get. And we're going to show both ways you can do it here. Again, you can take the two and roll to try and get one of the two and then try to get the other. But this is so low that if you're going to bother, roll until you get the one, just the physical, and then try to coin or disintegration. I don't typically do this because it tends to take a lot of resources. So we got 2 out of 3. We're going to coin. We got mana, so we're going to disintegration and hopefully get rid of the mana. We got rid of the hit point. That's okay. We'll coin. See what we get. We got a hit point back. Try to remove. We got rid of the mana. Dodge chance. So this would be acceptable, okay? Because we can take the physical damage and roll it, and then the dodge chance and craft it into a critical damage or something. And the hit points is fine. That would be acceptable. If you got the flat or the percent physical damage, that'd be great too. Now, the next part, whether you're going to Vesper or not, is totally up to you here. My thought process, again, behind resources if you are early game is if you don't have more than, let's say, 10 Vespers, Vesper the 3 mod. And we're going to assume that this is low, so let's Vesper the 3 mod, remove the suffixes, Vesper till the hit point, or the physical damage is as high as possible. So we want a 13 on there because the flat physical is going to make the biggest difference. And of course, we're just going to roll 100 times and not get anything. Good enough. We're taking it. 12. We got our thing, and we don't have to do anything else to go straight into the suffixes. So now we just start doing suffixes. There's our cooldown recovery speed. And since we got the cooldown recovery speed, even though it's a low value, we are going to try and remove to get the other. We didn't. We removed it immediately, as is the case in every single thing I work on in this video. Cooldown recovery speed again. So we're going to try to remove anything that isn't it. And we're going to just follow that process over and over. There's our back again. Hey, it didn't go away first time. Sentry critical damage. Unfortunate. There's our amp. That's the hardest one for us to get. And it's gone immediately. I'm so glad that happens in the videos, though. You don't feel bad when this happens to you, because it's amp it up. Okay, hold on. We'll get it. Now, the damage amp is much more important than the cooldown. So if we happen to get an amp roll that is very high, it's not worth risking losing that amp to get the cooldown. Because even the cooldown at a very high level is only 15% cooldown. Yes, we would like it, but it's not worth losing a high level amp roll. Because the high level amp roll can count for 9 damage amp, which is a very good roll. And we just can't get it to save our lives here. Cooldown, there we go. Cooldown and a decent level on the other. Poison resist doesn't really matter. There's nothing wrong with it. And early on, who really cares? Standard procedure, run rare change essence to roll till these are at good value. So this is only a 6.1, which is the bare minimum. We're going to roll until we get a high. We got a 7. Check the physical, make sure it's at a decent rate. It's not great, but we'll take it because I'm not too worried about it. Okay. Next up, obviously, we've got a legendary and standard jewelry stuff here. Hit point, attack speed, element, blah, blah, blah. Roll it. Hopefully you get something good. 100% physical damage. As a physical build, we'd be pumped to get that. That's great. Check the authority modifier. And I'm pretty confident this is just a percent damage one. I don't think there's anything super good here. There's critical damage, which is better than regular damage depending on how much critical damage you have. Critical damage has diminishing returns. The more critical damage you get, the less critical damage is worth. If you are very low on critical damage and just starting out playing a critical build, sure, go for the critical damage. Otherwise, just go for one of the damages. Damage, there we go. And from here, 2 jewels, white, red, white, blue, white, green, depending on what you need, although I recommend red. You can re-roll those at the jewel station. And of course, if you have something you don't want, you can craft to try and get something better. In this case, we definitely want to get this dot dodge chance into critical rate or physical damage, or you could do the poison resist and try to get a different resist if you need it, or hit points. So we'll do dot dodge chance, element resist. There we go, hit points, we'll take that. And that's the basic necklace. That's it. It's real straightforward, and you get a decent chunk of stuff out of it. Depending on the base you use, I used an attack speed here. Again, I recommend you go with a stats necklace for a lot of reasons. I just happen to have this and I didn't want to farm another one for the video, but stats is what you should go for. There's attack speed, there's cast speed, there's some other decent options like element damage and stuff, but generally I would say go for stats. We've only got 2 more basic pieces left, and it's weapon and belt. We're going to do belt first because it's going to be real short. Okay, let's talk about belt. Now we're going to talk about the baby version of the potion belt and a couple of things we can do to make the belt decent. Now, this is not something I recommend doing in terms of making a baby potion belt. It's worth it in terms of its output, but the upkeep on potions, especially for a player who's at the point where you would be making use of the stuff in this video, the upkeep on making a lot of potions can be a lot. And if you are forcing yourself to have to use them every single map at 2 minutes a potion, even if you're doing 2-minute maps, that's a potion a map. You can burn through a lot of potions very quickly, and the upkeep cost of this becomes very high. So I'm going to show you how to make the baby potion belt. But generally, I recommend not making a potion belt early on, but I do want to show the process. And then if you want to watch the full version of how to make an uber big, huge mega potion belt, the costs are insane generally. You're not there yet, because you need to be able to farm Serpent's Essence, or at least get access to quite a few Serpent's Essence, as well as Legendary Reversion Essence, and a ton of resources and cost. So this is the baby version, and then I'm going to show you a separate, like, decent way to make a regular belt. And what I generally recommend is just trying to get one of the 2 unique belts that are fairly easy to get, either the Peddler's Potion Belt or the Girth of Harmony, because they are generally better than what you're going to be able to craft at a low level. But in case you want to do a belt, let's show you the basic baby version. So we're going to want the authority for Vesper, okay? Because we want enhanced potion effect, which is something you can get from different sources, but the reason we're using Vesper is because something we can get as a prefix, and I'll talk about that in a second. The other thing we want on here is enhanced potion duration. I just had to redo this whole section because I got the right one, and then I got the wrong one, and then I got the right one again, and then I got the wrong one again, and then I said it was the right one, and then I was wrong. I know that's confusing, but it's long story short, I'm an idiot. So we're going to try to get enhanced potion duration and enhanced potion effect as our suffixes. And the enhanced potion duration is a much harder one to get, so we're going to use Alyssa Essences to get it. So enhanced potion duration, and if we hit the enhanced potion duration and the second thing, we take it. If we don't get it, we use our Disintegration Essence to try and remove one that is not it. If we happen to remove the duration, we go back to step 1, go find the enhanced potion duration again, and restart. Once we get both, depending on what we have on the prefixes, we will probably Vesper the suffixes, which we're probably going to do anyway, now that I think about it. Also, I got cat hair in my eye. You didn't need to know that, but now you do know. Enhanced potion duration, here we go. Come on, just let me get the thing real quick for the video. 2% dexterity, also a really good suffix if you can get it. The third suffix here in this baby potion belt is not nearly as important. Enhanced potion duration, disintegration. Hi, guess what? Chicken butt? What's going on? Welcome in. So there we go. We got our enhanced potion duration, we got enhanced potion effect, and we got dot duration, which is not of any use to us, but that doesn't matter because we're just trying to get basic potion belt, okay? Now that we have that, we are going to end up, actually, I'll just do it. Okay, so what do I do if you're trying to build the baby potion version? Also, stats belt. I've said stats on all the other jewelry, stats on this one as well. So we're going to remove the prefixes, and then we're going to Vesper to get what we want. So we want enhanced potion duration to 13, enhanced potion effect to 13, ideally. If we hit like a 12, like that, it's fine, we'll take it. Now we're going to go take the crafting, and we're going to put it on. So we're going to craft the enhanced potion duration. And try to craft it into enhanced potion effect right there. Once we hit it, if it's a good value, we move on with our lives and we go get the prefixes. I'm not going to spend a ton of resources here trying to do it. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom. Nope. Nope. There we go. Enhanced potion effect. So, between the two, we've got about 100% enhanced potion effect. And now we can go do some prefixes. The reason we should use the Vesper Authority, especially early on in the game, is because one of the Vesper Authority mods that we can get is minus mana cost. And that's what we're going to try to get here for the prefixes. There. Nope. We'll get it. It's a fairly high chance to land. Boom. Boom. Nope. Those are actually good mods, though. Normally, I would try to, if I was going to keep this belt, I would try to remove the shock chance to get the... There we go. A -2 mana cost. Now, if you can re-roll it and get -4, if you get to tier 10, you can get -4. In this case, I wouldn't worry. Now, these other two suck, and I would definitely re-roll these. But the reason we want this mana cost reduction, or resource cost reduction, early on in the game is it affects your auras. So this isn't a -2, it's a -2%. And if it's a 10%, that brings it down to 8%, and that makes a big difference to your overall mana cost, which is something a lot of people have trouble with early on. If you can get the 4, it's even better. And there's your baby potion belt. So this is going to increase the effect of every potion I use by over 100%. So if you used an enhanced potion that is a damage potion, I happen to have one kicking around in here. Thought I did. Did I? No, I didn't. Anyways, if you had one of the potions, they give you 10% amp, so now it'll give you 20%. If it gives you 5% attack speed amp, it's going to give you 10% attack speed amp. It makes all the potions twice as good, and that's really good for a whole bunch of reasons because you can use it offensively and defensively, and then the belt becomes very powerful. With that said, it's hard to keep up the cost of the potions early on. So there's a baby version of the belt. Now, if you don't want to do the potion version, you would keep probably the same prefix with the Vesper mana cost, and then get some stats on the suffixes so that you can fill in a bunch of other stuff. And that's the baby version of the belt. With that said, again, It's much easier, especially in the current version of the game, to get yourself one of the two belts that is just a better version of what we made there. Either the Peddler's Potion belt with a -7 resource cost, as well as a bunch of hit point amplification and move speed and a bunch of other really good things, or the Girth of Harmony, which is another very, very strong, unique belt that are both fairly easy to get your hands on, especially the Peddler's Potion. With that said, that's the belt. All we have left is weapon. Last up, we've got weapon. Now, there's the reason I left weapon to the end, because weapon is something that very likely you can find a unique weapon that fits your build well enough to give you more than you would get out of spending a ton of resources making a lower tier, lower level weapon. And that's just how things are right now. Almost always you're going to get a selection box. Almost always in that selection box, you are going to get a unique weapon that has the most important things when it comes to weapon are this number right here. The attack and spell damage, or attack damage or spell damage, depending on the weapon. This base value is what all of your damage is based on. It takes that plus any flat damage you have anywhere else in the build, and that's your base of your pyramid. So this is the most important thing. And if we look at my uber big PP weapon, I'm at 5,500, and that's not even good for this weapon. I'm at 5,500 attack. This one's only at 740. If we do this properly and build it really well at this level, we can maybe get 1,800 or something base damage. And that's not particularly great. We can use it to get us to a different weapon, and I am going to still do this, but most of the time crafting a weapon is not worth it unless you're going to be making it at a very high level, an item that is 165 or higher with a tier 35 vanished starlight, which is only accessible once you can do item level 165. It is generally the only time that it is worth actually making a weapon. But I am going to show this in case you are someone who doesn't want to use uniques for whatever reason and still want to get a good base weapon to progress with. Now, we're going to again assume that you are a crit build. Virtually every really high-end build in the game is crit based. Some of them are not. Lead builds aren't. They still use it and do whatever. Long story short, crit is very important. And those are the two things that matter on a weapon, are the base damage and the critical rate. This critical rate is going to get modified by every single other modifier you use that modifies your crit rate to get you to 100% crit rate. So there's almost always 3 different versions of a weapon at low level. So everything tier 35 or tier 34 and lower has 3 different variants of the weapons. You will have one with very low damage with really high critical rate, so like this one. You will have one with very high damage and very low critical rate, like this dagger, and then you'll have one that's in the middle. In the current version of the game, it is almost always going to be best to go with the one that has the highest damage. The crit rate is something that we can deal with in other ways, and I recommend just going straight for the damage ones. So we're going to take this one because it's the one that has the most. We're using a dagger. Doesn't, for the weapon base for whatever character you're going to use, doesn't really matter, okay, at this point in the game. As long as you pick the one that has the lowest critical rate. I know that's counterintuitive as a critical build. Why would you want low critical rate? But there's tons of ways to deal with low critical, but you still want certain modifiers on the weapon to make that critical rate high. But losing damage to get critical rate is something that's easy. Getting extra critical is easier than getting extra damage. After all that mumbling. Okay, so we've got our weapon here, and this is our base. For what it is worth, this is baby level weapon. Okay, this is starter stuff. And the reason I'm going to pick certain things on this, people will disagree with, but this is for people that are starting out and want to get farther into the game. Once you get farther in, you're not going to build a weapon like this. There's definitely more powerful ways to do this, but we're talking base level, get us off the ground. So first, we are going to put the Authority Akuben on this, and we're going to put that so that we can get additional lightning. If you're new to the game, getting additional, specifically worded additional damage gives you the ability to cause that effect even if you aren't that type. If you're physical and you have additional lightning, you cause shock effect. If you're fire and have additional lightning, you cause shock effect. And shock effect is the best early on one to get. Shock causes enemies to take more damage, period. The other effects, fire, poison, they all have their places and they all do their thing, but lightning is the only one that additional really matters. Now you can get it in your Zodiac, but if you can get it here instead, you get the same effect and you don't have to give up 7 Zodiac points to get it. So we're gonna start with that. So put it on, and we're gonna start with the prefixes. And again, weapon is going to be the hardest one to get a pretty good setup going. And it's going to be the most expensive of them. So this is definitely something that's going to take a little more resources than any of the pieces I've shown so far. The stuff we want to get here, hi Statler, what's up? Stuff we want to get here can vary depending on your build. Sometimes the weapon speed, if you're using a big slow two-hander, is going to be very important. But most gear is not something you're going to need to worry about this. And there's a lot of ways to get attack speed up so that you don't have to do it. So I wouldn't go for weapon speed in pretty much any case. But the ones we do want, obviously, the additional lightning, which is a very low chance. We would like to get additional, or not additional, we would like to get flat damage of our type. So in this case, physical, if we're doing a physical build. And then the other very, very important one is weapon attack and spell damage, but it is a very high chance to get, so we're not super worried about it. The other two are low, so the flat physical and the additional are both very low chances, but the attack and spell damage, which directly affects the base damage, is very high. So what we're going to do is the Alyssa. We're going to use an Alyssa. We're going to take the lowest one, so the additional lightning, and we're going to hit it, and we're going to hit nearly perfect on our first roll. God damn. That's hilarious. So, we get the attack and spell damage, we got the additional, and we got poison damage. Poison damage is mutually exclusive. It's going to take the thing. So, we're going to try to disintegration to remove the poison. Now, this is kind of a worst case scenario because we have to remove that and then get the one that is another very low chance. And we remove the attack. So even if we coin in the other, but we'll keep going because Alyssa's are at a premium. Remove, try to get flat physical. Nope, we didn't. Remove. That, we hit the thing. Pretty much to be expected. This will be, of the stuff I've shown, this step is going to be the hardest step we've done in any of them. This can be really frustrating if you're trying to get this. If you are going to give up on any point of it, okay, it is the flat physical. If you get the additional lightning and the weapon and spell damage, and let's say previously I had the physical percent or one of these damage affected by, take it. Because getting all three is very difficult, but the lightning and the attack damage are the most important, or spell damage if you're using a staff or a wand. So let's get lightning again. And what we're really hoping for is to get it. Now I'm gonna just start using Alyssa's. I would keep using, especially if you're low on resources, use the disintegrations, try to remove, and then coin until you get the thing. If you have a ton of Alyssas, I don't recommend wasting them at this point, but if you have a ton of Alyssas, you can just keep hitting until you get the one you want. So there. So there's, oh, never mind, I don't want that. You got our additional, we got our attack and spell damage. Unfortunately, not what we're going to keep using. Come on, just give me something cool so I can move on. I've been at this video a long time. But you know that because you're watching it and it's really long. poison damage again. But this is why I'm saying don't do what I'm doing and use Alyssa's over and over, because you can use a ton of them. They cost 60,000 gold to use each one, and if you're early in the game, getting Alyssa's is difficult. So don't do what I'm doing right now. Do what I'm saying to do, which is use one and then disintegration. Okay, pretty good. We got the physical, so we are going to try to remove the disintegration of the... of course, we hit the thing. And we got the attack and spell back. What the heck, let's try. Try to remove the debuff and get the lightning. I'd be blown away if we got it. It's a 1% chance. No, okay. Back to Alyssa's. At this point, if I was a player who's new, I would just be trying to hit the additional and the percent damage, the attack, because I've wasted a lot of resources here and got nothing. There's speed, which again, not the worst thing in the world, definitely not something we want. And again, to remind everybody, this is probably the hardest piece you have made if you're watching the video. We're just gonna take this, okay? Assume we got it, okay? Because the attack and spell damage is the most important part. If we hit the flat physical, great. If we hit one of the other damages, great. But the attack and spell damage is the most important one. It's more important than lightning, to be honest, but we want to make sure we get the lightning. So there we go. We've got our prefixes. This is the one time you are absolutely not going to Vesper and then try to get your suffixes and just take them as is. You are going to waste Vespers on this. This is probably going to be the biggest cost of any of the pieces so far. So when it comes to suffixes, we have two very important and one optionally important. Very important. Gear critical rate, right here. This directly affects the base critical damage. So even this at a tier 8, which is as low as it can go currently, takes this from a base critical of 9 to a base critical of 16.5. That is a huge difference. It doesn't sound like it, but you're going to get thousands of percent modifier that are going to make this value very big. So one number can make a huge difference in your actual crit rate. So going from 9 to 16.5, and that's not maxed, very important. The other thing we really care about when it comes to suffix, the next absolutely most important thing, is the weapon attack and spell damage percent. We have the flat version on the prefix, but the percent is going to modify this here. So if we look at the current value, it's at 485 max. Now, when we roll and we finally hit it, we'll see what it goes up to. We want prefix or suffix option removal essence, suffix option birth essence, and coin. In this case, we already have the gear critical rate, so we're going to try to remove to hopefully get our attack. We remove the critical. We got critical damage. Now, the third modifier has a bunch of options you can take, all of which are going to be good. So you can get maximized damage, even if you are not a maximized build, because it can craft into amplification. Critical damage, which again, keep it as is or craft it into damage amplification. There's also physical percent, which is totally acceptable. There's also penetrations that can be very handy if you are an element one, but we're just going to try to get the basics here. Let's see if we can get what I'm looking for, which is the critical and the attack damage. So there's attack and spell damage at a tier 7, and we went from 400 and whatever to 775, and that's at tier 7. At tier 13, it's going to more than double it. So this is the most important modifier on here for damage. So hopefully we can get critical. Gear critical rate. We would take this, okay? And we would definitely take this because we could turn this cold, we could craft it into physical damage, okay? So this would be really good. Important thing here is Vespers. And like I said, you're going to spend a ton of Vespers on this compared to the other ones. The other ones you might hit it in 1 or 2 rolls. This one you're probably not going to, because you have 4 modifiers, all need to be at high value, okay? The attack and spell damage is, okay, hold on, in reverse order. Lightning damage is the least important value. Any amount of lightning damage, additional lightning damage, is going to give you shock effect. If you get more, great. If you don't, it's not a big deal. The attack and spell damage is the next most important moving up, because this is going to affect the base damage. The percent is the most important. And why am I saying that above the critical? Mostly because critical is at the bottom. The critical is important to hit a high value, but when it comes to overall damage, this attack and spell damage is the most important modifier on it. So we're going to Vesper and hopefully hit a 13 on it right away. So we hit a 13, we got 96%, and we're now up to more than double the damage it was previously. It's still not good though, even though we have the attack and spell damage at 11, because the gear critical is so very low. If you get a 10 or an 11 on the critical, it's fine, but getting even 10 I wouldn't probably take. So we would Vesper again, the 13 and an 8. So we're gonna Vesper a couple times here. 13, we're over 1,000 damage now. Unfortunately, the gear critical is still abysmal. 13 and a 12, attack is critical, is bad. This is what I'm saying, where this is where you're going to spend a lot of Vespers, and eventually you're going to just take one. But let's see how long it takes me to get one that I would deem acceptable, because this is, it's, your weapon is the base of all of your damage, and it's very important to get this. So there's one I would take. It's not super amazing, but every single thing on there is 2-digit. The attack and spell damage is not particularly high. The gear crit isn't particularly high, but again, we're talking about low resource cost stuff. So that was like, I don't know, 20 Vespers for a okay roll. This could be really costly when it comes to it. From here, the standard fare would apply. We would roll rare change essence to get this value, that value, so we can get another 5% on here. So if we're looking 952, and if I roll that till we hit a 79, 975, then 979. So a decent increase. And you would roll those till you get what you want. Then we would Vesper, or sorry, not Vesper, Legendary. Legendary on this is the one time that you really want to hit a particular modifier. If you have a few legendary reversions available, this is a good place to use them early on. Don't waste a ton of them. Don't go crazy trying to get it. But what you're really hoping to get, hopefully we can get it fairly quickly here. I could just show you, but I want to get it, because I want to see the damage difference. So 979. Come on. Be cool. Be cool. Said be cool. This is hilarious. Oh my god. A couple more and then I'm just gonna show you. I wanted to show you the difference in the damage because it's important, but there we go. Percent attack and spell damage. That's what we were aiming for right there. It's a suffix on legendary, and again, we gain 200 base damage. Very important to get if you can get it. Obviously, quality matters a ton here. Again, we're at 1149. We're gonna roll for at least 8 quality on the first one. This is another place where that 2% quality is gonna pay back in spades if you can get it. So we get that there, and then we get the quality modification essence, which can go up to 20. We want high teens. There's a 14, we'll take it. And the last thing we want on here is your authority essence once it is legendary, and you want Seftar. Yes, Seftar, gear item quality, and you're gonna roll until you get quality. Now, again, 2% difference is worth it. So if you have extra of these, try to get the 6% as opposed to the 4% that I keep getting over and over here. Come on, don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk. Why are you being a jerk? That's a 3%. That's even worse. 4%. Why? Why, game? Why do you do this to 4%? And it just gets worse. If you're me, don't worry, this won't happen to you. This only happens to me. Come on, give me a 5 or something. 3, 4. Just, if you're low on resources, take the 3 up here. There's a 6. So just those 3 quality things brought us up another 200 base damage. Obviously very important. Now, if you happen to get decent modifiers for the prefix and suffix of the third thing, so the 4 that matter and the 2 that don't matter as much, if you happened to get quality, let's say you got the damage when enemy is affected by dot and the physical damage here, you would do the attack and spell damage as your craft and try to get more attack and spell damage, because again, I can't stress enough how much attack and spell damage is the base of all of your damage. The more of this you get, the more damage you're going to do for everything. Jewels, again, when it comes to early on, white jewel, red jewel, this will be the first place I would recommend putting a black jewel or a star jewel. Don't use the star jewel on this weapon when you get to the end game. So there you go. That's weapon. Now, obviously, depending if you have a bow, if you have whatever, they're all going to be the same sort of setup. If you are a non-crit build, instead of getting the crit damage, you would just get another modifier that you can get amplification for. That's pretty much the only difference. Again, crafting, you want attack and spell damage is the most important thing if you can craft more of it. The thing I do want to talk about that's unrelated to gear, but it is very related to your gear, and I wanted to bring it up in the weapon thing, is in your mastery. When you get enchanting mastery, and now that you're doing enchanting with this video, these 2 are the most important modifiers in here. Okay, the one gives you up to 50 base damage on your weapon, and the other one gives you up to 40% damage on the weapon, which again is a whole separate modifier on how much damage the thing will get. So if we put this on, I'm at 16, almost 1700, as opposed to 1300 when I don't have it on. So that shows that mastery modifier is very important when it comes to weapon. Now, the other thing I could show is quiver, which is going to give you bow damage, but really it's the same sort of modifiers that you get on weapon if you're doing a quiver. The other one offhand that I'm not going to bother showing is the, I don't even know what it's called, the bag for the bow guns. It has, again, the same modifiers more or less as a weapon. You're going to get a lot, like this quiver is a good example. Flat physical damage, strike damage amplification, some critical stuff, magazine, thank you. And it's all more or less the same as the stuff you'd get on the weapon, except you're not going to get the critical, and you're not going to get attack and spell damage because they are base. They're for the weapon itself. And that's it. That's every piece of gear a basic version of. Now, with that said, unfortunately, I don't know nearly enough about the current versions of minions or sentries or traps, or even if there would be anything different in terms of dot for the basic stuff. I know that as a dot user this season, that's all the same gear that I started with this season. So hopefully this will help. If there is something else that I missed in regards to a basic modifier that is very helpful for very base level stuff, because that's what this video is for, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thank you for watching this very long video. Again, timestamps are in there if you want to jump around to different stuff. I will make sure I get them up. Hopefully this helps, and if you're enjoying on December, good. That's what I'm here for. I want you guys to enjoy. If you want me to do a more end game version of this with more optimized stuff, I might. But really, I'll probably just direct you to the videos that I put out for my gear that I build for myself, which will be out in probably a couple of days for my dot build on the season. that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe, pet cats, eat broccoli, and you'll see me next time.